Welcome to a story of power, deception, and survival, forged in the harshest crucible. If you're ready to witness how two souls turned manipulation into mastery, stay until the end, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. Don't forget to hit that like button. The carriage rolled to a halt before Ashford Manor, just as the first snow began to fall. Duke Rowan Ashford stood at the frost-rimmed window of his study, watching the vehicle emerge from the tree line like a specter. The horse's breath misted in the bitter air. The driver climbed down, opened the door, and extended a gloved hand. A woman stepped out. Even from this distance, Rowan could see she didn't move like someone desperate. There was no hesitation in her posture, no trembling uncertainty. She stood tall, her dark cloak billowing around her as she surveyed the estate with an assessing gaze that made something tighten in his chest. This was not what he'd been promised. "Your Grace," his steward Edmund murmured from the doorway. "The lady has arrived." "I can see that." Rowan's voice was flat, controlled. He turned from the window, straightening the cuffs of his coat. "Have her brought to the drawing room. I'll meet her there." "And her companion?" Rowan's jaw tightened. "What companion?" "She traveled with a maid, Your Grace. The contract specified she would arrive alone." The first crack in the carefully constructed facade. Rowan's fingers drummed once against the windowsill, a rare tell of irritation. "Send the maid to the servants' quarters. I'll speak with Miss Marlowe privately." Edmund bowed and withdrew. Rowan remained at the window a moment longer, watching as Evelyn Marlowe climbed the steps to his door. The marriage contract had been brokered through intermediaries, her family desperate to settle debts, his own advisors insisting he needed an heir to secure the duchy's future. It was meant to be simple. Transactional. A woman of modest birth trading her youth for security, a duke trading his name for lineage. But the woman approaching his door moved like she was walking into battle, not sanctuary. He made his way through the cold corridors of Ashford Manor, his footsteps echoing off stone walls that had stood for 3 centuries. The estate was remote by design, nestled in the northern mountains where his ancestors had carved out power through steel and strategy. It was a fortress as much as a home, and in these times that distinction mattered. The drawing room fire had been lit, but the warmth hadn't yet penetrated the chill. Rowan entered to find Evelyn Marlowe standing before the hearth, her back to him, still wearing her traveling cloak. "Miss Marlowe." She turned, and for the first time Rowan saw her face clearly. She was beautiful. That much had been promised. Dark hair pulled back in an elegant style, features that were both delicate and sharp, but it was her eyes that arrested him. Gray-green, like a winter sea, and utterly unflinching as they met his. "Duke Ashford." Her voice was steady, cultured, no trace of the desperation he'd expected. "Thank you for receiving me." "You're my betrothed. Receiving you is hardly optional." He moved further into the room, studying her. "I trust your journey was uneventful?" "As uneventful as one can hope, given the season." She didn't look away, didn't lower her gaze in the deference he was accustomed to. "Your estate is formidable." "It's meant to be." Rowan gestured to the chairs near the fire. "Please sit. We have matters to discuss before tomorrow's ceremony." She hesitated just a fraction of a second, then moved to the chair with that same composed grace. As she sat, her cloak fell open, and Rowan noticed her dress beneath. Fine fabric, expertly tailored. Not the wardrobe of a woman fleeing poverty. He took the chair opposite, maintaining the distance of propriety. "I'll be direct, Miss Marlowe. This marriage is a formality. You'll have your own quarters, your own household allowance. I expect discretion and the eventual production of an heir. Beyond that, we need not—" "Did they tell you I was desperate?" she interrupted quietly. Rowan paused. "Excuse me?" "The intermediaries, the ones who arranged this." Her fingers were clasped in her lap, knuckles white. "Did they tell you I was desperate for this marriage? That my family was destitute and I had no other options?" The directness of it caught him off guard. In his world, people danced around truth, wrapped it in pleasantries and protocol. "They indicated your circumstances were difficult." "They lied." 2 words spoken with absolute certainty. Or rather, they told you a version of the truth that served their purpose. Rowan leaned back, reassessing. "And what is the actual truth, Miss Marlowe?" She met his gaze, and he saw something flicker in those gray-green eyes. calculation perhaps, or fear held ruthlessly in check. That depends, Your Grace. Are you a man who can be trusted with the truth? Or are you simply looking for a convenient vessel to bear your children and decorate your dinner table? The bluntness of it should have offended him. Instead, Rowan felt the first stirring of genuine interest. You're remarkably bold for a woman in a precarious position. I'm bold because I'm in a precarious position. She stood abruptly, moving to the window. And because I suspect you are too, or you wouldn't have agreed to marry a stranger through intermediaries. She was right, of course. The Duchy's council had been pressuring him for years. Marry, produce heirs, secure the succession. His refusal to engage in the performative courtship of the nobility had frustrated them. When the intermediaries had presented this arrangement, it had seemed like the perfect solution. All the benefit, none of the theater. But now he wondered what he'd actually agreed to. My father died 6 months ago, Rowan said finally. The Duchy has enemies, old feuds, territorial disputes. The council fears instability without a clear line of succession. And you? What do you fear? I don't fear. The words came automatically, a lifetime of training. I calculate risk and mitigate it. Evelyn turned from the window, and there was something almost like sympathy in her expression. Then you're better at lying to yourself than I am. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Outside, the snow was falling harder, visible through the window behind her like static. Why are you really here, Miss Marlowe? Rowan asked quietly. She was silent for a long moment, and he could see her weighing the risk of honesty. Finally, she moved back to her chair, sitting with careful precision. Because the alternative was death, she said simply. Or something very close to it. Rowan's expression didn't change, but his mind sharpened instantly. Explain. There's a man. She stopped, corrected herself. There was a man. Is a man. Lord Nathaniel Carver. Do you know the name? He did. Carver was minor nobility from the Southern Territories, but he wielded disproportionate influence through wealth and carefully cultivated alliances. There were also rumors, whispers of obsession, of women who caught his attention and then disappeared from society. I know of him, Rowan said carefully. 6 months ago, I made the mistake of catching his eye at a gathering in the capital. Evelyn's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly in her lap. At first, it seemed like ordinary courtship. Flowers, letters, invitations. My father encouraged it. Carver is wealthy, powerful, a good match. But it wasn't ordinary courtship. No, the single word carried volumes. It became suffocating. He appeared everywhere I went, sent gifts I didn't want, made it clear to other suitors that I was claimed. When I tried to refuse him politely, he escalated. When I refused him directly, he became dangerous. Rowan's fingers tightened on the arm of his chair. Dangerous how? He destroyed my father's business partnerships, spread rumors about my family, made it clear that if I didn't accept his proposal, he would ruin us entirely. She looked up, and there was steel in her gaze now. But I still refused, because I could see what he was. What he wanted wasn't a wife, it was a possession, a thing to control and break. So you fled. So I negotiated. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The same intermediaries who brought your proposal to me also brought mine to you. They painted me as desperate, penniless. They likely told you I'd be grateful, compliant. They certainly told Lord Carver that I'd left the capital for a rural posting, nothing more. But you came here instead. I came here because I needed to disappear. Because your estate is remote, defensible, and because a marriage to you would put me legally beyond his reach. She leaned forward slightly. I didn't come for money, Your Grace. I came for sanctuary. The pieces were assembling in Rowan's mind with cold clarity. And you believe he'll come for you anyway. I know he will. There was no doubt in her voice. Nathaniel Carver doesn't accept refusal. He certainly won't accept that I married someone else. The only question is when. Rowan stood, moving to the window. The snow was building on the grounds, coating the estate in white. In his mind, he was already calculating approaches to the manor, defensive positions, the loyalty of his household guard. Why didn't you tell the intermediaries the truth? He asked without turning. Because the truth makes me a liability. A desperate woman fleeing debt is one thing. A woman being hunted by a powerful nobleman is another entirely. She paused. I gambled that once we were married, you'd be invested enough in your own reputation to protect what's yours, even if you didn't particularly want me. He turned to face her. That's remarkably calculating. I learned from the best. The bitterness in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. My father was a merchant. I grew up watching him negotiate, leverage, survive. It just never occurred to me that I'd have to use those skills to negotiate my own freedom. Rowan studied her, truly studied her, not as the convenient solution to his succession problem, but as an actual person. A woman who'd walked into a trap baited with power and obsession, and who'd fought her way out the only way she could. He respected that. The marriage was to take place tomorrow, he said slowly. Quiet ceremony, just the household. That was the agreement. Yes. And you expected to arrive, marry a stranger, and hope for the best. I expected to arrive, fulfill a contract, and buy myself time. She stood as well, meeting his gaze. I don't need your affection, Your Grace. I don't even need your particular protection. I just need the legal shield of your name and the physical barrier of your estate. In return, you get what you were promised, a duchess, an heir eventually, and no scandal. It was all so rational, so bloodlessly transactional. And yet, you're wrong about one thing, Rowan said quietly. What's that? If Carver comes for you, and you're right, he will, it won't be about protecting my reputation. He moved closer and saw her tense slightly. I've spent my entire life in these mountains, Miss Marlowe. My family carved this duchy from stone and snow and the bones of men who thought they could take it from us. I don't particularly care about society's opinion of me. Then why? Because I don't allow thieves in my home. His voice was flat, certain. And I don't allow anyone to take what's mine. The moment we sign that marriage contract, you become mine, not as a possession, but as a responsibility, and I protect what I'm responsible for. Evelyn stared at him, and for the first time he saw her composure crack slightly. You don't even know me. No, but I know men like Carver. I know obsession and the violence it breeds. He paused. And I know that any woman capable of engineering her own escape with this much precision is worth defending. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The ceremony is tomorrow, Rowan said finally. We'll proceed as planned, but tonight, I need you to tell me everything about Carver. His resources, his allies, his patterns. If he's coming, I want to be ready. You believe me, then? It wasn't quite a question. I believe you're telling me the truth as you see it. Whether Carver is as dangerous as you think remains to be seen. He moved toward the door. But I didn't survive this long by ignoring warnings. Your Grace, she stopped him with her voice. When he turned back, she looked suddenly vulnerable, the mask of composure slipping. Why are you doing this? You could send me away, void the contract. It would be simpler. Rowan considered the question. The honest answer was that he didn't entirely know. Perhaps it was the challenge of it. His life had become predictable, and this was anything but. Perhaps it was the recognition of someone fighting to survive, something he understood intimately. Or perhaps it was simply that when he looked at Evelyn Marlowe, he saw not the convenient solution he'd been promised, but a kindred spirit. Someone who understood that the world was brutal and calculating, and that survival required being more brutal and more calculating than your enemies. Because I'm curious, he said finally. You've disrupted my expectations, Miss Marlowe. I find I want to see where this leads. A small, genuine smile touched her lips, the first he'd seen. That's remarkably honest. I've found that honesty, properly deployed, can be more devastating than any lie. He opened the door. Edmund will show you to your quarters. We'll dine together in an hour, and you can tell me everything about the man who thinks he can hunt you into my territory. She nodded, and he saw her square her shoulders, rebuilding that composure like armor. Thank you, Your Grace. Rowan, he said, if we're to be married, you should use my name. Evelyn, she replied softly. He left her there, making his way through the corridors with purpose. His mind was already working, analyzing, planning. If Carver was truly as obsessed as she claimed, the marriage wouldn't stop him. It would provoke him. Good. Rowan had been raised in these mountains, trained by a father who believed that power without the will to use it was worthless. The duchy was remote, yes, but that remoteness had always been its greatest strength. Here, far from the capital's intrigue and the court's games, strength mattered more than influence. And Rowan Ashford was very, very strong. He found Edmund in the main hall. Double the guard rotation. I want the perimeter watched at all times. Edmund's eyebrows rose slightly. Your Grace? We may have visitors, unwelcome ones. Rowan's voice was cold, certain. Make sure the men are prepared. Should I send word to the capital? Request additional... No, Rowan cut him off. This is a private matter. We handle it ourselves. Edmund bowed, and Rowan could see the old steward calculating, trying to understand what had changed in the span of an hour. But he was loyal enough not to question, and that loyalty was about to be tested. Rowan climbed the stairs to his private chambers, where maps of the duchy and surrounding territories lined the walls. He'd memorized every approach to the manor, every defensible position, every advantage the terrain offered. Now he studied them with fresh purpose. If Carver came, he would come with force. Men, resources, the arrogance of someone who believed wealth and obsession trumped everything else. He would expect resistance, but he would underestimate it. Men like him always did. They thought power came from gold and influence. Rowan knew it came from stone, steel, and the absolute certainty that you would do whatever was necessary to protect what was yours. He heard a knock at the door. Enter! Edmund stepped in, his expression carefully neutral. Your Grace, forgive me, but I must ask. The lady, is she in danger? Rowan turned from the maps. Yes. And we are committing to her protection. We are. Edmund nodded slowly. Then I'll inform the household. They should know what's at stake. Tell them this. In 24 hours, Evelyn Marlowe becomes Duchess Ashford. Anyone who threatens her threatens the duchy itself. And we respond accordingly. The old steward's eyes hardened with understanding. They'll be ready, Your Grace. After Edmund left, Rowan returned to the maps. But his mind wasn't on terrain anymore. It was on the woman downstairs, currently being shown to her quarters by servants who had no idea they were about to be drawn into something far more dangerous than a simple arranged marriage. She'd come here seeking sanctuary, expecting a cold transaction. What she didn't understand yet was that Rowan Ashford didn't do anything halfway. If she was going to be his wife, his duchess, then she would have the full weight of his protection. Not because he loved her, they barely knew each other, but because that was what honor demanded, what survival demanded, and because somewhere in that calculating, desperate gambit she'd played, she'd demonstrated exactly the kind of ruthless intelligence he respected. The world thought him cold, brutal, unfeeling. They were right, but they mistook coldness for weakness, brutality for simplicity. What they didn't understand was that Rowan's coldness was simply clarity. He saw the world as it was, violent, unforgiving, ruled by those strong enough to carve out their piece of it and defend it against all comers. Evelyn Marlowe had walked into his fortress seeking shelter from a storm. She was about to learn that shelter came with a price: alliance, partnership, and the expectation that she would stand and fight when the storm inevitably arrived at their gates. Because it would arrive. Rowan was certain of that now. Lord Nathaniel Carver, whoever he truly was, had made a fatal mistake. He'd fixated on a woman strong enough to escape him, clever enough to engineer her own sanctuary, and desperate enough to walk into a stranger's home and bet her life on his protection. And in doing so, he'd brought himself to the attention of a man who had spent his entire life learning one essential lesson. Predators who hunted in his territory became prey. Rowan looked out over the snow-covered grounds, watching as his guards took up their positions, as the estate settled into its nighttime rhythms. Tomorrow, he would marry Evelyn Marlowe. It would be a small ceremony, witnessed by a handful of people, legally binding but emotionally hollow. Or so he'd thought. Now he wondered. Because in the space of one conversation, the game had changed entirely. This wasn't a transaction anymore. It was a declaration, a line drawn in the snow that said, this far and no further. And when Carver crossed that line, because he would, Rowan would be waiting. not as a reluctant protector, not as a man defending his reputation, but as exactly what he'd always been, a duke forged in the harshest landscape in the realm, heir to a legacy of men who'd never learned to yield, commanding an estate that had stood against armies and won. Let Carver come with his wealth and his obsession and his entitled rage. Rowan would show him what happened when gold met steel. And when it was over, Evelyn Marlowe would understand something essential. She hadn't just married into sanctuary. She'd married into war. Dinner was served in the smaller dining hall, a concession to intimacy that felt more like an interrogation chamber. Candles flickered against wood-paneled walls, casting long shadows that seemed to watch as Evelyn entered, her earlier composure rebuilt but fragile. Rowan stood as she approached, gesturing to the seat across from him. The table stretched between them like a negotiating table, plates of food already arranged with military precision. "I wasn't sure what you preferred," he said, sitting after she did. "So I had Cook prepare options." "That's considerate." Evelyn's voice carried a note of surprise as she surveyed the spread: roasted pheasant, winter vegetables, fresh bread still steaming. "More than I expected." "Lower expectations serve you well in negotiations," Rowan observed, reaching for wine. "But they also reveal what you've learned to accept." She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "You're very direct." "I find it efficient." He poured for both of them. "Now, tell me about Nathaniel Carver." "Everything." The shift from pleasantries to business was jarring, deliberate. Evelyn set down her fork, seeming to gather herself. Outside, wind rattled the windows with increasing violence. "He's 43, she began. Inherited his father's shipping empire at 25 and doubled it within a decade. On paper, he's a respectable member of the merchant nobility, attends the right gatherings, donates to the right causes, cultivates the right alliances. And off paper? Off paper, he's a collector." The word dripped with contempt. "He sees something beautiful or rare, and he must possess it. Art, horses, land." She paused. "Women." Rowan's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened slightly on his wine glass. "How many?" "That I know of? 4, before me. Women who caught his attention at social functions. He courted them relentlessly, showered them with gifts, made public displays of devotion." Her voice dropped. 2 married him. Both disappeared from society within a year. One fled to the continent. I met her once, by accident, in a dressmaker's shop. She wouldn't speak about what happened, but her hands shook the entire time. And the 4th? Vanished entirely. Her family claims she eloped with a merchant sailor, but no one believes it. Evelyn met his gaze. "That's when I started paying attention. When I realized the pattern." Rowan leaned back, processing. "Yet you didn't flee immediately when he showed interest." "I told you my father encouraged it at first, and I thought I could manage it. Polite refusal, gradual distance." Bitterness crept into her voice. "I underestimated his obsession and his resources." "Walk me through the escalation." She did. The story emerged in careful detail. Gifts that became invasive, attention that became surveillance, courtship that curdled into possession. Carver had men watching her movements, intercepting her correspondence, ensuring no other suitor could approach. When she'd finally confronted him directly at a public function, refusing him in front of witnesses, his mask had slipped entirely. "He told me I was being foolish," Evelyn said, her voice steady, but her knuckles white around her wine glass. "That I didn't understand what I was refusing, that he could give me everything, wealth, status, protection, that I should be grateful. And when gratitude didn't materialize? He destroyed my father's primary shipping contract. 3 generations of partnership ended with a single letter. Then he started the rumors that our family was bankrupt, that I was desperate, that I'd been inappropriate with multiple men and was now unmarriageable." She took a long drink of wine. "He was systematically eliminating every option I had except him. So you created a new option." "I paid the intermediaries everything I had saved to find me a marriage prospect far from the capital. Someone respectable enough that the contract would hold legal weight, remote enough that Carver couldn't easily interfere." She looked at him directly. "You were the 3rd option they presented. The first 2 were elderly men looking for nurses, essentially. You were the only one who seemed capable of defense," Rowan finished. "Yes, He stood, moving to the window. The snow was falling harder now, the world beyond the glass transforming into white chaos. You're right about one thing. He'll come. Men like Carver don't understand boundaries. They see opposition as temporary obstacles, resistance as a challenge to overcome. I know. Her voice was quiet. That's why I needed distance, time, the legal protection of marriage. Legal protection is meaningless if he's willing to ignore it. Rowan turned to face her. And if he's as obsessed as you describe, a marriage certificate won't stop him. It will enrage him. I know that too. She stood as well, moving toward him with sudden intensity. But what else could I do? Run forever? Live in hiding? I needed something, someone, with enough power to make him hesitate. And you think I have that power? I think you have this estate, these mountains, distance from the capital's politics, and the reach to defend your own territory. She stopped a few feet away. I think you're a man who doesn't bend easily, and I gambled that your pride wouldn't allow someone to take what's yours, even if you didn't particularly want it in the first place. The honesty of it was almost brutal. Rowan found himself reassessing her again, not as a victim seeking refuge, but as a strategist who'd played the only hand she had with ruthless precision. You're wrong about one thing, he said quietly. What's that? I don't make decisions based on pride. I make them based on principle. He moved closer, closing the distance between them. The principle that says when someone enters my protection, they receive all of it. Not the appearance of safety, but actual defense. The principle that says territory is meaningless if you're not willing to hold it against all threats. Evelyn's breath caught slightly. You're saying to some... I'm saying that tomorrow you become my wife, my duchess, and anyone who comes for you comes through me. His voice was steel wrapped in silk. But I need something from you in return. What? Truth, absolute truth. If we're going to survive what's coming, I need to know every detail, every vulnerability, every resource Carver has. He paused. And I need to know that you won't bolt the moment things become dangerous, that you'll stand and fight. She held his gaze, and he saw something shift in her expression, calculation giving way to something raw. I've been fighting since the moment he fixed his attention on me. I didn't come here to hide, Rowan. I came here to find a position I could defend from, with you or without you. Then let's make it with. He extended his hand. Partners. Not in romance, but in strategy. Two people who understand the world is brutal, and survival requires being more brutal than your enemies. Evelyn stared at his hand for a long moment, and he could see her weighing the risks, measuring the commitment. Then she reached out and clasped it firmly. Partners, she agreed. Her hand was smaller than his, but her grip was strong, steady. They stood there in the candlelight, the wind howling outside, sealing an alliance that had nothing to do with affection and everything to do with survival. Now, Rowan said, releasing her hand and moving to the table. He spread out a map of the duchy and surrounding territories. Show me everywhere Carver has influence. Every ally, every business holding, every position of leverage. They worked through the night, Evelyn marking locations while Rowan asked sharp, probing questions. The picture that emerged was troubling. Carver's reach extended further than expected, his alliances more strategic. He had relationships with 3 lesser nobles whose territories bordered Ashford lands, business contracts with merchants who supplied the estate, even a distant cousin who served in the king's administrative court. He's been building a network, Rowan observed, studying the marked map. This isn't random obsession. This is calculated. He calculates everything, Evelyn said tiredly. It was past midnight now, the candles burning low. That's what makes him dangerous. The obsession drives him, but he's methodical about pursuing it, which means he already knows you're here. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Evelyn's face paled slightly. How could he? The intermediaries were probably in his employ from the beginning. Rowan's voice was flat, certain. Think about it. You needed to disappear, so you sought out intermediaries who could broker a quiet marriage. Carver needed to know where you'd go, so he made sure those same intermediaries were on his payroll. They gave you options, you chose one, and now he knows exactly where to find you. Then this was all. Her voice broke slightly. I walked right into his trap. No. Rowan's voice was sharp enough to cut through her spiraling panic. You walked into my territory. There's a difference. Is there? If he knows I'm here, if he's been planning this, then we forced his hand earlier than he wanted. Rowan moved to the window again, his mind working rapidly. He expected you to run somewhere undefended. A small country estate, maybe, or a distant relative's home. Somewhere he could extract you quietly, with minimal resistance. Instead, you married a duke with a standing garrison and a fortress that's never been taken. But if he has allies, resources, then we match them, exceed them. He turned back to her. Evelyn, listen to me. The moment you agreed to this marriage, you changed the game. Carver thought he was hunting prey. Now he's walking into a territory dispute with an opponent who has every legal and military right to defend his own. She stood shakily, moving to stand beside him at the window. You sound very certain. I am. He glanced at her. Do you know why my family has held this duchy for 300 years? Through civil wars, succession crises, invasions from the north? Because we understand one essential truth. Position matters more than numbers. This estate is positioned in terrain that favors defense. Any force approaching has to come through narrow passes, across open ground, into fortifications designed by military engineers. Carver can bring wealth and men, but he can't bring geography. He could lay siege. In winter? In these mountains? Rowan's smile was cold. He's welcome to try. We have stores for 6 months, wells that never freeze, and supply lines to villages that have supported Ashford rule for generations. A siege would destroy him long before it touched us. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. You've thought about this before. Defense of the estate. Every Duke of Ashford has thought about it since the first walls were laid. He paused. But usually the threat is military invasion, not a lovesick merchant with delusions of possession. The description was so blunt it startled a laugh from her, short, sharp, edged with hysteria. I've brought a war to your doorstep. You've brought purpose. Rowan's voice softened slightly. I told you earlier, my life had become predictable. This is anything but. That's a remarkably calm way to view being threatened. I've found panic to be counterproductive. He moved away from the window, back to the maps. Now, we proceed with the ceremony tomorrow as planned. Word will spread quickly. It's meant to. We want Carver to know you're legally bound to me, that any claim he thinks he has is voided. That will provoke him. Yes, but provocation on our terms, in our territory, is better than waiting for him to choose the moment. Rowan began marking positions on the map. We'll increase guard rotations here, here, and here. Post watchers on the northern pass. It's the most accessible approach. Send riders to the neighboring villages with instructions to report any strangers immediately. You're preparing for war. I'm preparing for a man who thinks he can take what's mine through force or intimidation. Rowan looked up from the map. And I'm making sure he understands the cost of that attempt. Evelyn moved closer to the table, studying his markings. You don't even know me. We met hours ago. Why are you doing this? It was the second time she'd asked, and Rowan realized he needed to give her a better answer. He straightened, considering how to articulate something he barely understood himself. My father used to tell me that power without principle is just brutality, he said finally, that what separated a duke from a warlord was the willingness to protect those under your authority, not just exploit them. You sought my protection. That creates obligation. Obligation, she repeated softly. Yes, but also... He paused, searching for words. I've spent my entire life being told what I should want. A society marriage, political alliances, heirs for the succession. No one ever asked what I actually valued. And what I value is competence, intelligence, the courage to make hard decisions when there are no good options. And you think I have those qualities. I know you do. You engineered your own escape from a situation most people would have simply endured until it destroyed them. You walked into a stranger's home and negotiated an alliance from a position of almost no leverage. He met her eyes. That takes remarkable strength, the kind I can respect. Something shifted in her expression, the defensive calculation softening into something more vulnerable. Thank you. For that, and for believing me. Most people wouldn't. Most people are fools who mistake appearance for reality. Rowan's voice was matter-of-fact. Now, you should rest. Tomorrow will be demanding, and you'll need your strength. What about you? I'll sleep when I finish the defensive preparations. He saw her start to protest. I'm used to functioning on minimal rest. You're not. Go. She hesitated, then nodded. But at the doorway she turned back. Rowan, when he comes, and I believe you that he will, please don't underestimate him. He seems civilized, charming even, but underneath, he's capable of remarkable cruelty. I don't underestimate anyone, he returned to his maps. But I think you underestimate what he's walking into. Sleep well, Evelyn. Tomorrow you become untouchable by law. And shortly after that, Carver will learn the difference between obsession and ownership. She left, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Rowan continued working, marking guard positions, calculating supply needs, composing messages to his most trusted men. The wind continued to howl outside, the snow building in drifts against the windows. He was still working when Edmund entered near dawn, finding the Duke surrounded by marked maps and half-written orders. Your Grace, you should rest before the ceremony. I'll rest after. Rowan didn't look up. Have these orders distributed to the guard captains. I want implementation begun immediately after the wedding. Edmund collected the papers, scanning them with experienced eyes. This is quite extensive. You're expecting significant trouble. I'm expecting a test. Rowan finally looked up, and his eyes were hard as winter ice. And I intend to pass it decisively. The household is wondering, let them wonder. After the ceremony, I'll address the entire staff. They deserve to know what's at stake. He stood, rolling his shoulders to ease the stiffness. The Duchess will need a lady's maid, someone trustworthy, capable of discretion. Do we have anyone suitable? Margaret served your mother for 30 years. She's getting on in age, but still sharp. Assign her to Evelyn, and make sure she understands that anything the Duchess shares remains absolutely confidential. Edmund bowed. Of course, Your Grace, and, if I may? Speak. The staff is pleased you're marrying. They were concerned about the succession. The old steward's expression was carefully neutral, though perhaps not under these circumstances. No one ever gets to choose their circumstances, Edmund, only their response to them. Rowan moved toward the door. Make sure the chapel is prepared. I want the ceremony completed before noon. Very good, Your Grace. Rowan made his way to his chambers, finally allowing himself the luxury of fatigue. But even as he prepared for a few hours of rest, his mind continued working, analyzing, planning. Carver would come. Probably not immediately. He'd want to assess the situation first, probe for weaknesses. But he would come, driven by that toxic combination of obsession and entitlement that made men like him so dangerous. And when he did, Rowan would be ready. Not because he loved Evelyn, they barely knew each other, but because she'd asked for his protection, and he'd given his word, because she'd demonstrated the exact kind of ruthless survival instinct he respected, and because Nathaniel Carver had made the fatal mistake of believing that wealth and obsession could overcome position, preparation, and the absolute certainty of a man defending his own territory. The morning arrived gray and bitter cold, the snow having fallen all night. Rowan dressed in formal attire, dark coat, silver buttons, the Ashford crest prominent on his chest. He looked like what he was, a duke preparing for battle, even if that battle was currently disguised as a wedding. The ceremony was brief, held in the estate's small chapel, with only essential witnesses present. Evelyn appeared in a simple but elegant dress, her face composed but pale. When she met Rowan's eyes across the altar, he saw fear there, carefully controlled but present. He understood. This was the moment of no return. Once they spoke the vows, she was bound to him, and to whatever consequences that binding brought. The priest droned through the traditional words. Rowan spoke his vows clearly, firmly, watching Evelyn's face as she repeated hers. Her voice only wavered once on the word obey, and he saw her jaw tighten with something that might have been rebellion or might have been dark humor. Then it was done. Rings exchanged, contracts signed, witnesses marking their names. Evelyn Marlowe ceased to exist, replaced by Evelyn Ashford, Duchess of Ashford, with all the legal protections and obligations that title carried. They walked from the chapel together, Rowan's hand on her elbow, formal and distant. But in the privacy of the corridor, he felt her trembling slightly. "It's done," he said quietly. "You're safe now, legally, at least." "For how long?" The question was barely a whisper. "For as long as I can make it last." He squeezed her elbow gently, the first truly reassuring gesture he'd made. "Trust me, Evelyn. I know what I'm doing." Before she could respond, Edmund appeared, his face grave. "Your Grace, a messenger has arrived, from the capital." Rowan's expression hardened. "Show him to my study. Evelyn, go to your chambers. I'll inform you of anything significant." She nodded, gathering her skirts and moving quickly down the corridor. Rowan watched her go, then turned to Edmund. "The messenger. Does he carry Lord Carver's colors?" Edmund's silence was answer enough. Rowan's smile was sharp, predatory. "Then it begins." "Good. I was getting tired of waiting." He strode toward his study, every muscle ready, every sense sharp. Carver had made his first move faster than expected, but Rowan had planned for this, prepared for it. Now they would see who truly understood power, and who was merely playing at it. The messenger was young, wearing Carver's household colors, blue and silver currently dusted with road snow. He bowed nervously as Rowan entered, clearly aware he was in hostile territory. "Your Grace, I bring correspondence from Lord Nathaniel Carver." He extended a sealed letter with a trembling hand. Rowan took it, noting the quality of the paper, the precise seal. He broke it open and read, his expression revealing nothing. The letter was a masterpiece of implied threat wrapped in formal courtesy. Carver congratulated Rowan on his marriage, expressed surprise at the suddenness of it, and casually mentioned that he had concerns about Miss Marlowe's, now Duchess Ashford's, welfare. He requested permission to visit the estate at his earliest convenience to ensure her happiness and well-being. It was polite, reasonable, and absolutely transparent in its actual meaning. "I know what you've done. I'm coming for what's mine, and your title won't protect you." Rowan read it twice, then looked at the messenger. "You'll return to Lord Carver with my response. Tell him the Duchess is in excellent health and spirits, that she sends her regards, and that uninvited visitors to Ashford lands are not welcome. Am I clear?" The messenger paled. "Your Grace, Lord Carver was quite insistent." "Then let me be equally insistent." Rowan's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. "This estate is sovereign Ashford territory. I decide who enters it, and I've decided that Lord Carver is not welcome now or at any point in the future. If he has concerns about the Duchess, he can address them through legal channels. If he attempts to approach this estate without invitation, he will be turned away. By force, if necessary. But, Your Grace, that is my final answer. You're dismissed." The messenger fled, practically running from the study. Edmund, who'd remained by the door, watched him go with concerned eyes. "Your Grace, that was quite provocative." "It was meant to be." Rowan moved to the window, watching the messenger's rapid departure across the snowy grounds. "Carver sent that letter to test boundaries. I've just shown him exactly where those boundaries are. Now he has to decide. Does he respect them, or does he cross them knowing the consequences? And if he crosses them?" Rowan's reflection in the glass was hard, certain. Then he learns why Ashford lands have remained unconquered for 300 years. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white silence. But beneath that silence, something was building. A confrontation that would test everything Rowan had claimed, everything he'd promised. And somewhere to the south, in a manor house in the capital, Nathaniel Carver was reading a messenger's report and making a decision that would bring all of this to its inevitable, violent conclusion. The game had begun in earnest, and neither player had any intention of yielding. 3 days passed in tense preparation. The estate transformed from a quiet winter fortress into something approaching a military encampment. Guards doubled their rotations. Watchers positioned themselves at every approach, and the household staff moved with the nervous energy of people who knew something was coming, but not when. Evelyn spent those days learning the estate's layout with methodical precision. Rowan found her in the armory on the second morning, studying the weapons with a scholar's intensity. "Looking for something specific?" he asked from the doorway. She didn't startle, though she hadn't heard him approach. Knowledge. If this becomes violent, I want to understand what resources we have. We have 32 trained guards, another 15 men from the village with combat experience, and enough weapons to outfit double that. He moved to stand beside her. But you're not thinking about defense, are you? I'm thinking about what happens if they get inside. Her fingers traced the edge of a cavalry sword without touching it. Carver won't come alone, and he won't come unprepared. If he breaches the outer defenses, he won't. Rowan's voice was flat certainty. But if he did, you'd retreat to the keep. There's a fortified chamber in the east wing with supplies, weapons, and a passage that leads to the village through the mountain. Edmund knows it. So does Margaret. She turned to face him. You're planning my escape route. I'm planning contingencies. There's a difference. He paused. But yes, if things go catastrophically wrong, you need a way out. That was always part of the arrangement. Sanctuary, protection, and if necessary, escape. And you? I stay. The answer was immediate. This is my land, my responsibility. I don't abandon either. Evelyn studied his face, searching for something. You mean that? You'd actually die defending this place? If it came to that, yes. He said it as casually as commenting on the weather. But I have no intention of dying. I intend to make it prohibitively expensive for Carver to continue this obsession. Cost-benefit analysis applied to violence. A small smile touched her lips. You're a strange man, Rowan Ashford. I've been called worse. He gestured toward the door. Come. There's something you should see. He led her to the northern tower, up narrow stone stairs to a watchpost that overlooked the entire valley. From here, the estate's defensive advantages were obvious. Narrow passes, open approaches, killing fields where any attacking force would be exposed and vulnerable. But Rowan wasn't showing her the terrain. He was showing her the smoke. 3 columns, rising from the forest to the south. Too distant to see details, but close enough to send a message. How long? Evelyn's voice was steady, but her hands gripped the stone parapet. Since dawn. The Southern Watchers reported it an hour ago. Rowan handed her a spyglass. Campfires. 3 of them, positioned just beyond our territorial boundary. Not close enough to be an immediate threat, but close enough to be visible. She looked through the glass and he saw her jaw tighten. How many men? Estimates vary, between 40 and 60. Well-equipped, organized, not a mob, a force. He took the spyglass back. Carver's making a statement. He wants us to know he's here, that he's brought enough men to be dangerous, and that he's patient enough to wait for the right moment. This is my fault. The words were barely audible. I brought this to you. You brought opportunity. Rowan cut her off sharply. Carver brought threat. Don't confuse the two. How can you be so calm? Because panic serves no one. He pointed to the camps. Look at the positioning. He's split his force into 3 groups, probably thinking it gives him flexibility. But it also means his men are divided, communication between camps is difficult in this terrain, and if we move fast enough, we can hit them separately before they coordinate. Evelyn stared at him. You're thinking about attacking them. I'm thinking about options. He lowered the spyglass. Defense is strongest when it's active, not passive. Sitting here waiting for him to choose the moment gives him all the advantage. But if we force his hand, dictate the engagement, you could also provoke exactly the violence you're trying to avoid. The violence is coming regardless. Carver didn't bring 60 men for negotiation. Rowan's voice was matter of fact. The only question is whether we face it on our terms or his. Before she could respond, Edmund appeared at the tower entrance, breathing hard from the climb. Your Grace, a rider approaches, single man, carrying a white flag. Rowan and Evelyn exchanged glances. Parley, she said quietly. He wants to talk. He wants to intimidate. Rowan moved toward the stairs. But we'll hear what he has to say. Come with me. I want him to see that you're here by choice, not by force. They descended to the main courtyard where guards were already assembled. The rider had stopped at the outer gate, waiting with practiced patience. As Rowan and Evelyn emerged from the main building, the gate opened and the rider entered. He was middle-aged, scarred, wearing military-grade armor beneath Carver's colors. A professional soldier, not some merchant's hired thug. His eyes took in the defensive preparations with the assessment of someone who'd seen real combat. "I bear a message from Lord Nathaniel Carver," he announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "For Duke Rowan Ashford and the lady known as Evelyn Marlowe." "The Duchess Ashford," Rowan corrected coldly. "Use her proper title or use nothing." The writer's expression didn't change. "Lord Carver requests an audience with Duke Ashford. He wishes to resolve this situation peacefully, without conflict that would benefit no one. Then he can withdraw his forces and return to the capital." Rowan's voice was hard. "That would resolve things quite peacefully. Lord Carver has legitimate concerns about the Duchess's welfare. He merely wishes to speak with her to ensure she entered this marriage of her own free will and not under duress." Evelyn stepped forward before Rowan could respond. "I'm standing right here. You can deliver Lord Carver's concerns directly to me." The writer's gaze shifted to her and something flickered in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or assessment. "My lady, my apologies, Your Grace. Lord Carver is worried that you may have been misled about Duke Ashford's character and intentions. He offers you sanctuary in his household, no conditions attached, if you wish to leave this place." "How generous!" Evelyn's voice dripped with contempt. "Tell Lord Carver that I'm exactly where I choose to be. That I married Duke Ashford willingly, legally, and with full understanding of my actions, and that his concern for my welfare is neither wanted nor appreciated." "Your Grace, if you're being coerced—" "Do I look coerced?" She moved to stand directly beside Rowan, close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm. "I'm standing in my own home, surrounded by people sworn to my protection, speaking freely to a man carrying my former suitor's message. If I wanted to leave, nothing would stop me. I don't want to leave. Is that clear enough?" The writer was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I'll convey your message, Your Grace." "Convey this as well," Rowan interjected. "Lord Carver has until tomorrow at noon to withdraw his forces from Ashford lands. If he remains beyond that deadline, I'll consider it an act of aggression and respond accordingly. Those are my terms. They're not negotiable." "Your Grace, Lord Carver brought 60 armed men, and I have this." Rowan gestured to the estate around them. "Terrain, fortification, supply lines, and the legal right to defend my own territory against trespass. Tell Carver to do the mathematics. If he's half the businessman you all claim, he'll realize this venture has become prohibitively expensive." The writer's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I'll deliver your message, Your Grace. Both of your messages." He pulled his horse around, pausing at the gate. "For what it's worth, Your Graces, Lord Carver doesn't respond well to ultimatums. He tends to see them as challenges." "Good," Rowan said simply. "I intended it as one." The writer departed, and the gate slammed shut behind him. Immediately, the courtyard erupted in nervous conversation among the guards. Rowan raised his hand, and silence fell. "You all heard the exchange," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard. "We have until noon tomorrow before this situation becomes active conflict. Use the time to prepare. Check your equipment, rest when you can, and remember, we hold every advantage here: position, preparation, and purpose. They have numbers and obsession. I know which I'd rather command." The guards dispersed with renewed purpose. Edmund approached, his expression troubled. "Your Grace, an ultimatum was necessary. Carver needs to understand that waiting us out isn't an option, that his presence is costing him time and resources, and that we're not intimidated." Rowan turned to Evelyn. "Come, we need to discuss what happens next." They returned to his study where maps and defensive plans covered every surface. Rowan poured wine for both of them, a concession to the tension that was building like pressure before a storm. "He won't withdraw," Evelyn said, accepting the glass. "You know that." "I know." Rowan moved to the map. "But now he has to make a choice. Attack directly, which plays to our strengths, or try something more subtle, which takes time he doesn't want to spend in these mountains in winter. Or he tries to divide us." She set down her glass. "That's what I'd do, if I were him. Find a weakness. Exploit it. Turn your people against you. Make them question whether I'm worth defending." Rowan looked at her sharply. "You think someone here would betray us?" I think Carver is very good at finding pressure points and applying exactly enough force to make them crack. She moved to stand beside him at the map. He destroyed my father's business partnerships with rumors and well-placed bribes. He turned the capital society against me with whispers and implications. He doesn't fight clean, Rowan. He fights to win. Then we make sure there's nothing to exploit. Rowan's mind was already working. Edmund is loyal beyond question. Margaret the same. The guard captain has served this house for 20 years, but the others should be watched, not because they're disloyal, but because even good people can be manipulated if the right pressure is applied. She paused. Rowan, I need to tell you something. Something I should have mentioned earlier. The shift in her tone made him look up from the map. What? Carver's cousin, the one who serves in the King's administrative court. His name is Magistrate Philip Carver, and he has the authority to issue warrants for arrest, seizure of property, all sorts of legal complications. Rowan's expression went very still. You're saying Carver might have legal cover for whatever he's planning. I'm saying he's capable of manufacturing it. A warrant claiming I was kidnapped, forced into marriage against my will. An order for my rescue that gives him legal protection for what he's about to do. Her voice was tight. I've seen him do it before. One of the women who fled him, he had her declared mentally incompetent, had her family's assets frozen, forced her back into his custody under the guise of care and protection. That won't work here. You spoke freely to his messenger, in front of witnesses. Witnesses he can claim were intimidated or coerced. Rowan, I'm not saying it's a strong legal case. I'm saying it doesn't have to be. He just needs enough official cover to make what he does seem legitimate, to protect himself from consequences afterward. Rowan was silent, processing this new dimension of threat. If Carver had legal cover, even manufactured, it changed the calculation significantly. Defending against an obsessed suitor was one thing. Resisting what could be framed as lawful authority was another entirely. Then we need leverage of our own, he said finally. Something that makes the legal route too risky for him to pursue. What kind of leverage? The kind that comes from forcing him to reveal his true nature in front of witnesses he can't intimidate or bribe. Rowan moved to his desk, pulling out fresh paper. I'm calling in markers. Lords I've served with, merchants who owe the duchy favors, anyone with influence who can be here within 3 days. That's after your deadline. The deadline was for Carver's benefit, not ours. It forces him to act hastily, maybe make mistakes. He began writing rapidly. But we need more than military defense. We need political witnesses. People who can testify that you're here willingly, that this marriage is legitimate, that any action Carver takes is based on obsession, not legal authority. Evelyn watched him work, something shifting in her expression. You're building a case, not just a defense, but a counteroffensive. I'm building insurance. If Carver wants to play legal games, we'll make sure the cost of losing those games is catastrophic for him. Rowan signed the first letter with a flourish. Edmund! The steward appeared almost instantly. Your Grace? I need these letters delivered immediately. Fastest riders, spare horses, priority routing. He handed over a stack of sealed correspondence. And send word to the village. I want every able-bodied man who can hold a weapon assembled here by tomorrow morning. Volunteers only, but make sure they understand what's at stake. Edmund's eyes widened slightly as he scanned the addresses. Your Grace, some of these are quite influential. Which is exactly why I'm calling on them now. Rowan's voice was hard. Carver thinks he can operate in shadows, use influence and intimidation without consequence. We're going to drag this into the light and let everyone see exactly what kind of man he is. After Edmund left, Evelyn moved closer to the desk. This could backfire. If your allies decide I'm not worth the political complication, then they were never truly allies. Rowan met her gaze. But they will come, because what Carver is doing, bringing armed forces onto another noble's lands, threatening a peer's household, that sets a precedent every lord in the realm should fear. If he can do it to me, he can do it to anyone. You're making this about more than just us. I'm making it about principle, territory, the rule of law versus the rule of obsession. He stood. And yes, about us. Because you're my Duchess now, and that means something. Not just to me, but to everyone who understands what those bonds represent. Before Evelyn could respond, a commotion erupted from the courtyard. Shouts, the sound of running feet. Rowan was moving before conscious thought, Evelyn close behind him. They emerged to chaos. Guards rushing toward the northern wall, weapons drawn. Edmund pointing toward something beyond the gates. And there, visible even from the courtyard, fire. Not in the camps, in the village. He's attacking the village, Evelyn breathed. He's forcing your hand. Rowan's mind went ice cold, calculating. The village was 2 miles away, connected to the estate by a well-traveled road. It had no defensive walls, no standing guard. Families lived there. Children. People who'd supported Ashford rule for generations and deserved protection. Carver had found his pressure point. "How many men to defend the village?" Rowan demanded of his guard captain. 20, Your Grace, but that leaves the estate undermanned. He knows that. He's trying to divide our forces, make us choose between protecting the estate and protecting the village. Rowan's jaw clenched. "Get me 30 volunteers. We ride in 10 minutes. Your Grace, it's a trap. Of course it's a trap, but we're going anyway." He turned to Edmund. "You command the estate defenses in my absence. If Carver attacks here while we're gone, hold the gates and send riders for reinforcement. Understood?" Edmund's face was pale, but determined. "Understood, Your Grace." Rowan strode toward the armory, already mentally selecting weapons, planning the approach. Behind him, he heard Evelyn running to keep pace. "You can't go," she said urgently. "This is exactly what he wants. You out of the estate, vulnerable, and if I stay, innocent people burn while I hide behind walls." He didn't slow down. "That's not who I am, Evelyn. That's not what this duchy represents." "Then let me come with you." He stopped so abruptly she nearly collided with him. "Absolutely not." "Why? Because I'm a woman? Because I'm the one he wants?" Her eyes blazed. "I can ride, I can shoot, and this is my fault. Those people are burning because of me. They're burning because Carver is a monster who uses innocence as leverage." Rowan gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. "And you're not coming because if something happens to me out there, you're the one who has to hold this estate. You're the Duchess. You're the symbol of what we're defending. Edmund and Margaret will follow you. The guards will follow you. But only if you're here." "Rowan, no." His voice was absolute. "This is not negotiable. I need you here, safe, ready to take command if I don't come back." "You'll come back." She said it with fierce certainty. "You have to." Something passed between them in that moment. Not love. They didn't know each other well enough for that. But recognition, partnership, the understanding that they were bound together now in ways that went far beyond a legal contract. "I intend to," he said quietly. Then, louder to the assembling men, "Mount up. We leave in 5 minutes." The ride to the village was brutal. Hard ground, darkness broken only by torchlight, the smell of smoke growing stronger with every mile. Rowan pushed the pace mercilessly, knowing every minute delayed meant more destruction, more danger. They crested the final hill and saw the full scope of it. The village wasn't fully burning, just 3 buildings on the outskirts, strategic fires meant to terrify rather than destroy. And there, in the village square, Carver's men. Not 60, maybe 15. Enough to terrorize unarmed villagers, but not enough to hold against armed resistance. "It's a feint," Rowan's guard captain said grimly. "Small force, maximum terror. Draw us out, while the real attack comes at the estate." Rowan's blood ran cold. He split his forces, made us think all 60 were in those camps, but some circled around. "They're hitting the estate right now." He wheeled his horse. "Captain, take half the men and secure the village. Drive out Carver's forces, but don't pursue. The rest of you, with me. We're going back." The ride back was even more brutal than the approach. Rowan pushed his horse to the edge of collapse, mind racing with terrible calculations. How many men had Carver sent? What was their approach? Would Edmund be able to hold the gates? Would Evelyn be safe? That last thought crystallized something in his mind. When, exactly, had her safety become more important than abstract duty? When had she transformed from a strategic alliance into someone whose death would be— He couldn't finish the thought. didn't want to. They thundered through the gates to find the estate under assault. Not a full siege. Something worse. Infiltrators had gotten inside somehow, and now fighting raged in the courtyard itself. Rowan saw Edmund rallying guards near the main entrance, saw Margaret shepherding servants into the keep, saw Evelyn. On the steps of the main building, sword in hand, facing down 3 of Carver's men, Rowan's vision went red. He drove his horse directly into the melee, scattering attackers. Guards rallied around him, the momentum shifting instantly. But Rowan had eyes only for Evelyn, who was holding her ground with desperate competence, her dress torn and bloodied, though he couldn't tell if the blood was hers. "Evelyn!" He was off his horse before it fully stopped, cutting down one attacker, driving another back. "Get inside!" "Not without you!" She parried a strike, her technique crude but effective. "There are more." They got through the eastern passage. Of course. The escape route he'd shown her. Carver had found it somehow, used it to bypass the walls. A dozen men, maybe more, already inside the fortifications. "Edmund!" Rowan roared. "Seal the east wing! No one in or out! Your Grace, the Duchess, is staying with me." He grabbed Evelyn's arm, pulling her toward the relative safety of the guard formation. "Where's Margaret?" "The keep, with the others." Evelyn's breathing was ragged. "Rowan, one of them was asking for me specifically. Carver's here. Somewhere." Ice ran down Rowan's spine. "Where?" "I don't know, but I heard him, his voice, giving orders." A voice cut through the chaos, smooth, cultured, edged with madness. "Evelyn, my darling, this has all been terribly unnecessary." Nathaniel Carver stepped into the courtyard from the shadows of the east wing. He was 43, but looked younger, handsome in a way that would have been attractive if not for the cold obsession in his eyes. Well-dressed despite the violence, unarmed except for the 15 men who followed him into the open. The fighting stopped. Everyone, guards, attackers, servants, froze as the two forces faced each other across blood-stained stone. "Lord Carver," Rowan's voice was deadly quiet. "You're trespassing on Ashford lands. Surrender now, and I'll consider allowing you to leave with your life." Carver's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Duke Ashford, how pleasant to finally meet the man who thought he could steal my beloved." "I stole nothing. The Duchess married me of her own free will." "Did she?" Carver's gaze shifted to Evelyn, and Rowan felt her flinch beside him. "Or did you manipulate a frightened woman into a legal trap, using her desperation against her? I have documents, Your Grace. Warrants signed by a magistrate. Legal authority to investigate claims that this marriage was obtained through coercion and duress." "Those are lies," Evelyn started. "Are they?" Carver moved closer, his men forming up behind him. "You fled the capital in secret. You married a stranger within days of arrival. You've made no contact with your family or friends. To any reasonable observer, this looks very much like a kidnapping, not a courtship." "Then let's ask the reasonable observer," Rowan gestured to his assembled household. "Everyone here witnessed the Duchess's arrival, her freedom of movement, her clear consent to our marriage. Are you calling them all liars?" "I'm calling them your servants, hardly unbiased witnesses." Carver's voice remained calm, reasonable. "Which is why I've brought official authority. You can surrender the Duchess peacefully for questioning, or I can exercise my legal right to remove her by force. Your choice, Your Grace." The ultimatum hung in the air like a sword. Rowan could feel his guards tensing, ready to fight. Could feel Evelyn trembling beside him, not with fear, but with fury. Could feel the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. If he fought, people would die. His guards, Carver's men, maybe innocents caught in the crossfire. And Carver would frame it as resistance to lawful authority, would use it to justify even more extreme measures. If he surrendered Evelyn, she would disappear into Carver's custody. Whatever questioning meant in that context, it wouldn't be legitimate. She'd be lost, probably forever. Neither option was acceptable, so Rowan made the only choice he could. "I have a better solution," he said clearly. "Trial by combat, single combat. You and me, Carver. Right here, right now. The Duchess's fate decided by steel, not by corrupted legal documents." The courtyard went absolutely silent. Carver's smile faltered for just a moment. "That's archaic." Barbaric. The law doesn't recognize, the law recognizes a peer's right to defend his household against unlawful seizure. You brought armed forces onto my land, attacked my people, claimed legal authority you don't legitimately possess. Rowan stepped forward, away from Evelyn, his sword still in hand. I'm calling your bluff, Carver. If you truly believe you have the right to take the Duchess, prove it. Face me yourself, not hiding behind hired swords and manufactured warrants. This is madness. This is justice. Rowan's voice rang across the courtyard. Everyone here will witness. My guards, your men, the household staff. A clean fight, legitimate outcome. If you win, the Duchess goes with you, and I'll have no legal recourse. If I win, you withdraw all claims, all forces, and never approach Ashford lands again. Those are my terms. Evelyn grabbed his arm. Rowan, no, you can't. I can, and I am. He didn't look at her, keeping his eyes locked on Carver. What say you, Lord Carver? Are you brave enough to fight your own battles, or do you only threaten women and hide behind corrupt officials? The insult landed perfectly. Rowan saw it in the way Carver's expression twisted, the way his hands clenched. The man's obsession with appearing civilized, refined, superior, it wouldn't allow him to back down from such a public challenge. Very well. Carver's voice was tight with controlled rage. But when I win, Duke Ashford, I'll take more than just Evelyn. I'll take this estate, your title, everything you have. I'll make you watch as I destroy it all. If you win, Rowan handed his sword to Edmund, moving to select a dueling blade from the armory. But you won't. Because Nathaniel Carver was a merchant who'd bought his fighting skills along with everything else. He might be competent with a blade, might have hired the best instructors wealth could provide. But Rowan Ashford had been raised in these mountains by a father who believed that a duke should be the deadliest man in his duchy, had trained since childhood not for sport or show, but for the brutal reality of survival, had spent his life understanding that strength without skill was useless, and skill without the will to use it was worse. They faced each other in the center of the courtyard, the assembled crowd forming a rough circle. Carver had removed his coat, revealing expensive dueling attire beneath. He held his sword with practiced ease, falling into a textbook guard position. Rowan simply stood ready, sword point low, balanced on the balls of his feet. First blood? Someone called out. To yield or incapacitation, Rowan said flatly. This ends when one of us can't continue. Carver's eyes widened slightly. That wasn't the civilized duel he'd expected. But he was committed now, trapped by his own pride and obsession. They began. Carver attacked first, a probing strike meant to test defenses. Rowan parried easily, reading the technique, formal training, expensive instruction, designed for controlled dueling environments. Not for this. Not for the brutal, pragmatic combat that Rowan had learned from veterans who'd survived real warfare. They circled, exchanged blows, the ring of steel echoing off stone walls. Carver was competent, Rowan noted. Better than expected. But competence wasn't enough when facing someone who'd spent their entire life preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. Rowan feinted left, struck right, felt his blade bite into Carver's shoulder. First blood. Carver gasped, stumbled back. His men surged forward, but Rowan's guards blocked them instantly. The terms were set, Edmund roared. No interference! Carver recovered, his expression transforming into something feral. The civilized mask was cracking, revealing the obsession beneath. He attacked again, faster now, more aggressive, and less controlled. Rowan defended, waited, watched for the opening. There. Carver overextended on a lunge, left himself exposed. Rowan's counter was brutal and precise, disarming the merchant lord with a sharp strike that sent his sword flying. Carver fell to one knee, clutching his bleeding hand. The courtyard erupted in noise, cheers from the guards, shouts from Carver's men. But Rowan just stood there, sword point at Carver's throat, waiting. Yield, he said quietly. Carver looked up at him, and Rowan saw the exact moment obsession transformed into hatred. Never. I'll never. The knife came from nowhere. A hidden blade drawn from Carver's belt in a move too fast to counter. Not aimed at Rowan, aimed at Evelyn. Time seemed to slow. Rowan watched the knife fly, watched Evelyn's eyes widen, watched his own body move too slowly to intercept. And then Evelyn moved, not away, toward. She caught Carver's wrist mid-throw, twisted with surprising strength, and drove her own concealed blade, the small knife she'd taken from the armory, directly into his chest. Carver's eyes went wide with shock. He tried to speak, but only blood came out. Then he collapsed, twitching once before going still. The silence that followed was absolute. Evelyn stood over Carver's body, knife still in hand, her face pale but her expression fierce. He tried to kill me. You all saw it. He threw first. Edmund was the first to move, kneeling to check Carver's pulse. When he looked up, his face was grave. Dead, Your Grace. Rowan stared at his wife. When had he started thinking of her that way? And realized he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Not a victim seeking shelter. Not a convenient alliance, but a survivor who'd just killed the man who'd hunted her, who'd made her life a nightmare, who'd refused to let her go. She'd ended it herself. Witnesses, Rowan said, his voice cutting through the shocked silence. All of you saw what happened. Lord Carver lost the duel, then attempted murder against the Duchess. She defended herself. That's the truth that will be recorded. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Even Carver's men seemed shaken, unwilling to defend what they'd witnessed. But then one of them stepped forward, the scarred soldier who'd delivered the first message. My lord is dead. We acknowledge the Duchess acted in self-defense, but we require assurance we can leave these lands without prosecution. Rowan considered this. Granted. Take your dead and your wounded. Leave Ashford territory by dawn. If any of you return for any reason, you'll be treated as invaders. The man nodded once, sharply. Understood, Your Grace. As Carver's forces began collecting their casualties and preparing to withdraw, Rowan finally moved to Evelyn's side. She was still staring at Carver's body, the knife trembling in her grip. Gently, he took the blade from her fingers. It's done, he said quietly. It's over. I killed him. Her voice was barely a whisper. I actually killed him. You defended yourself. You defended all of us. He turned her to face him, forcing her to meet his eyes. You did what had to be done. Do you understand? You saved yourself, finally. Something broke in her expression, the last remnants of composure shattering. She collapsed against him, and Rowan caught her, holding her steady as her body shook with silent sobs. Around them, the household began the grim work of cleanup. Bodies carried away, blood scrubbed from stone, order gradually restored from chaos. But Rowan didn't move, just held Evelyn as she finally allowed herself to break. Because she could now. Because the threat was gone. Because Nathaniel Carver, the man who'd hunted her, controlled her, tried to possess her, was dead by her own hand. Come, Rowan said eventually, when her shaking had subsided. You need rest. We both do. She nodded against his chest, then pulled back slightly. What happens now? There will be investigations, questions. There will be witnesses who saw everything. Documentation of Carver's illegal entry onto our lands, his attack on the village, his forces inside our walls, and most importantly, 30 people who saw him attempt murder after losing a legitimate duel. Rowan's voice was firm. You'll be cleared of any wrongdoing because there was no wrongdoing, just survival. You sound very certain. I am, he smiled grimly, because I'm very good at documentation, and because Carver's cousin, the magistrate, just lost his most powerful patron. He'll be remarkably cooperative when I suggest the entire matter be recorded as self-defense during an attempted kidnapping. Evelyn managed a weak smile. You really have thought of everything. I've tried. He guided her toward the main building. Now come. Margaret will help you clean up, and then you're going to sleep. We'll deal with consequences in the morning. But as they climbed the steps, Evelyn paused. Rowan, thank you for everything, for believing me, for defending me, for... Her voice caught. For giving me the chance to defend myself. You didn't need my permission for that. He touched her face gently, surprising himself. You've always had that strength. I just gave you the space to use it. She leaned into his touch for just a moment, then continued inside. Rowan remained on the steps, looking out over the courtyard where Carver's body had finally been removed. The snow had started falling again, covering the bloodstains, hiding the evidence of violence beneath pristine white. It was over. But as he turned to go inside, one thought crystallized with absolute clarity. This had never been about obligation or strategic alliance. Somewhere between her arrival and this moment, Evelyn had become something far more dangerous to his carefully controlled existence. She'd become someone he couldn't imagine losing. And that changed everything. Rowan stood in the empty courtyard long after Evelyn had gone inside, watching snow cover the bloodstains. The realization settled over him with the weight of stone. This woman who'd arrived as a strategic necessity had become something he couldn't afford to lose. Not because of duty or obligation, but because somewhere in the chaos of the past week, she'd proven herself his equal in the only ways that mattered: intelligence, courage, the ruthless will to survive. He finally turned and went inside, finding Edmund in the main hall coordinating the final cleanup efforts. "Status?" Rowan asked. "3 of our guards wounded, none seriously. 2 servants shaken but unharmed. Carver's forces have withdrawn as agreed. The scouts report they're already past the territorial boundary." Edmund's expression was carefully neutral. "And the Duchess has retired to her chambers with Margaret." "Good." Rowan moved toward his study. "I need you to draft official statements from every witness to tonight's events. Detailed accounts, signed and dated. We'll need them when the capital starts asking questions." "Already begun, Your Grace." Edmund hesitated. "There's something else. During the fighting, one of Carver's men mentioned something about the magistrate's warrants being not entirely legitimate." Rowan looked up sharply. "Explain." "Apparently Carver pressured his cousin into pre-signing documents, blank except for the seal. He filled in the details himself without proper judicial review." Edmund's voice dropped. "It's fraud, Your Grace. If we can prove it, then Carver's entire legal justification collapses, and his attack becomes simple trespassing and assault." A cold smile touched Rowan's lips. "Find me that proof, Edmund. Search Carver's belongings before his men collect them. Carefully, but thoroughly." "It shall be done." After Edmund left, Rowan sat at his desk and finally allowed himself to feel the weight of everything that had happened. The fear he'd felt seeing Evelyn with a sword, facing down trained soldiers. The rage when Carver had thrown that knife. The shock when she'd struck back, ending it herself. She'd killed a man tonight, taken a life to protect her own. That kind of action changed a person, left marks that didn't show on the surface. He should go to her, make sure she was... A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter." Margaret appeared in the doorway, her lined face drawn with concern. "Your Grace, forgive the intrusion. The Duchess is asking for you." Rowan was on his feet immediately. "Is she unwell?" "In body? No. But in spirit." Margaret's voice softened. "She needs to speak with you, Your Grace, about what happened, about what comes next." He found Evelyn in her chambers, standing by the window in a clean dress, her hair still damp from washing away the blood and smoke. She turned when he entered, and he saw the strain in her eyes. Not tears, but something harder. The look of someone forcing themselves to remain composed through sheer will. "Margaret said you wanted to see me," Rowan said quietly, closing the door behind him. "I needed to thank you properly, without an audience." She moved away from the window. "You risked everything tonight, your estate, your guards, your own life. For me, a woman you barely know." "I know enough." "Do you?" Her voice carried an edge. "You know I married you to escape a monster. You know I brought danger to your home. And now you know I'm capable of killing when cornered." She met his gaze directly. "Are you certain you know what you've bound yourself to?" Rowan studied her, seeing past the composed exterior to the turmoil beneath. She was testing him, he realized, pushing to see if tonight's violence had changed his perception of her. "I know you're a survivor," he said carefully. "I know you're intelligent enough to engineer your own escape when conventional options failed. I know you're brave enough to stand and fight rather than hide when threatened. And I know that when faced with a man who would have destroyed you, you did what was necessary to end it." He paused. "Yes, Evelyn, I'm certain I know what I've bound myself to. The question is, Do you know what you've become? She flinched slightly. A murderer. A free woman. He moved closer. Carver's dead because he refused to accept your autonomy, because he saw you as a possession to be claimed, not a person with the right to choose her own path. You didn't murder him. You executed a man who'd been slowly killing you for months. The law won't see it that way. The law will see it exactly as I present it, and I present it as justified self-defense during an attempted kidnapping. His voice was firm. But more importantly, Evelyn, how do you see it? She was silent for a long moment, wrestling with something internal. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw. I see freedom. For the first time in 6 months, I can breathe without wondering if he's watching. I can sleep without nightmares of what he'd do if he caught me. I can exist without the constant weight of his obsession crushing everything else. She looked up, and there were tears now. Is that wrong? To feel relief that he's dead? No? Rowan closed the remaining distance between them. It's human. You survived something terrible, and now it's over. Relief is the least of what you're entitled to feel. I keep seeing his face. The moment he realized I'd stabbed him, the shock. Her hands trembled. I wasn't afraid when I did it. I wasn't even angry. I was just certain. This ends now. He dies or I do. And I chose me. As you should have. Rowan reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hands in his. Listen to me carefully. What you did tonight took courage most people never find. You faced the man who'd haunted you, and you won. Not because I protected you, though I tried. Not because the law saved you, though it will now. You won because you refused to be a victim anymore. The tears spilled over. I didn't want to be this person, someone who kills. Then don't be. You killed once, in defense, in a moment of absolute necessity. That doesn't define who you are unless you let it. He squeezed her hands gently. You're Evelyn Ashford, my Duchess. A woman who survived obsession and emerged stronger. That's the person you are. That's the person you choose to be. She pulled her hands free and turned away, wiping at her eyes. You're remarkably good at this, saying exactly what I need to hear. I'm saying what's true. There's a difference. He paused. Evelyn, I need to tell you something about why I really challenged Carver to single combat. She turned back, curious despite her distress. You wanted to force his hand, remove the legal cover. I wanted to kill him myself. The bluntness of it made her eyes widen. When I saw him in that courtyard threatening you with fraudulent warrants and corrupted authority, I wanted to put a sword through his heart, not for justice, not for strategy, for you. Rowan, I'm not finished. He moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered grounds. I told myself this marriage was practical, strategic, a solution to succession problems and your need for sanctuary. I convinced myself I could maintain that distance, that professional detachment. He turned to face her. But somewhere between your arrival and tonight, that changed. You became more than a duchess in name. You became someone He stopped, searching for the right words. Someone whose safety matters to me more than strategy dictates it should. Evelyn stared at him, and he could see her processing this revelation. You're saying you care about me. I'm saying I've come to respect you in ways I didn't anticipate, to value your presence in ways that have nothing to do with legal contracts or political necessity. He held her gaze. And yes, I care about you, more than is probably wise, given we've known each other less than a week. She was silent for so long he thought he'd miscalculated, revealed too much too soon. Then she moved toward him with sudden purpose and kissed him. It wasn't soft or tentative. It was fierce, desperate, the kiss of someone claiming something they'd been denied. Rowan responded instinctively, one hand moving to her waist, while the other cupped the back of her head, deepening the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Evelyn's eyes were bright with something that wasn't tears. I care about you too, she said simply. I didn't want to. I came here expecting a cold arrangement, a man who'd tolerate my presence in exchange for airs and social obligation. Instead, I found someone who saw me as a person worth defending, worth fighting for. She touched his face gently. Worth believing. You made that easy. No, I made it complicated. I brought danger and chaos into your ordered life. And purpose. He caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek. And challenge. And the first genuine interest I've felt in years. Evelyn, you didn't complicate my life. You made it worth living. She kissed him again, softer this time, but no less intense. When they separated, she rested her forehead against his chest, and he held her there, feeling her heartbeat gradually slow from its frantic pace. What happens now? She asked quietly. Carver's dead, but his allies, his business interests. There will be consequences. There will be investigations, questions, probably political maneuvering by people who owed Carver favors or feared his influence. Rowan's voice was calm, certain. But we handle it together. We document everything that happened, we present it to the proper authorities, and we make it very clear that anyone who questions the Duchess's actions is questioning whether a woman has the right to defend her own life. That's a dangerous precedent for some people. Good. Let them be uncomfortable. He pulled back slightly to look at her. Evelyn, I'm not going to let anyone punish you for surviving. Not the law, not society, not anyone. You're under my protection, and that means something. I know. She smiled faintly. You've proven that rather definitively. A knock at the door interrupted them. Edmund's voice came through, respectful but urgent. Your Grace? Forgive the interruption, but there's something you need to see. Rowan opened the door to find Edmund holding a leather folder, his expression carefully blank. What is it? Documents. Found in Lord Carver's personal effects before his men collected them. Edmund handed over the folder. I think you'll find them quite illuminating, Your Grace. Rowan opened the folder and felt cold satisfaction settle in his chest. Inside were the blank warrants Edmund had mentioned, pre-signed by Magistrate Philip Carver, but with details filled in later in different handwriting. Obvious fraud to anyone who looked closely. But there was more. Correspondence between Nathaniel and Philip Carver discussing the scheme, letters to intermediaries arranging Evelyn's marriage prospects, even a ledger documenting payments to various officials for their cooperation in tracking her movements. This is everything, Rowan said quietly. Every crime, every manipulation documented in his own hand. Evelyn moved to look over his shoulder, her breath catching as she recognized names, dates, details of the conspiracy that had controlled her life for months. He kept records, of all of it. Men like Carver always do. They see it as insurance, leverage against future threats. Edmund's voice was grim. He never expected to lose, never imagined these documents would be used against him. But they will be. Rowan closed the folder carefully. Edmund, I need copies made of everything in here, multiple copies, secured in different locations. Already arranged, Your Grace. One set goes to our legal counsel in the capital, one to the territorial magistrate, one to your personal vault. And one to me, Evelyn said firmly. Both men looked at her. If questions arise about tonight, about the marriage, about any of this, I want evidence in my own hands, not relying on lawyers or officials or anyone else. My safety. My proof. Rowan nodded slowly. Agreed. Edmund, make 4 copies. Your Grace. Edmund bowed and withdrew. Alone again, Evelyn moved back to the window, staring out at the night. With this evidence, we can destroy Carver's entire network. Everyone who helped him, everyone who looked the other way. We can. Rowan joined her at the window. The question is, do we want to? She turned to him sharply. What do you mean? I mean that dismantling Carver's influence will take time, resources, political capital. It will keep us embroiled in capital politics for months, maybe years. Investigations, testimonies, counter-accusations from people trying to save themselves. He paused. Or we can release enough evidence to clear your name and establish self-defense, then let the rest of Carver's empire collapse on its own without our direct involvement. You're saying we could just walk away? I'm saying we could choose which battles to fight. Carver's dead. His immediate threat is gone. We can spend the next year dismantling his legacy piece by piece, or we can take our victory and build something here instead. Rowan gestured toward the window, toward the estate beyond. A life, a real partnership, Something that doesn't revolve around the man who tried to destroy you. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, considering. Part of me wants to burn it all down. Everyone who helped him, everyone who enabled his obsession. I want them to face consequences. And they will. The evidence exists now. Other people Carver wronged will use it. Authorities will investigate. He turned to face her directly. But Evelyn, do you want to be defined by that? By revenge and legal battles and the slow grinding of justice? Or do you want to be defined by what you build from here? She met his gaze, and he saw the conflict in her eyes, the desire for vengeance warring with the need to move forward. Finally, she exhaled slowly. I want to build something. Her voice was quiet but certain. I've spent months being defined by Carver's obsession, by fear and survival and desperate escapes. I don't want to spend more months being defined by his death. I want to be defined by what comes next. Then that's what we'll do. Rowan took her hand. We'll release enough evidence to protect you legally and make sure Carver's crimes are known. But we won't make it our life's work to destroy every person he touched. We let them face their own consequences while we build something better. Together. Together. He raised her hand to his lips, a gesture that felt both formal and intimate. Partners. In more than just survival now. She smiled, genuine warmth breaking through the strain. I like that. Partners. The next morning brought cold clarity and hard decisions. Rowan assembled the household in the main hall, everyone from guards to kitchen staff, and addressed them directly about what had happened and what would come next. Lord Carver is dead, he began without preamble. He died attempting murder after losing a legitimate challenge. The Duchess defended herself, as was her right. That is the truth, and it will be documented as such. He paused, letting that settle. But there will be questions, investigations, people from the capital arriving to examine the circumstances, and I need all of you to understand what's at stake. He gestured to Evelyn, who stood beside him with composed dignity. The Duchess is not a criminal. She's a survivor who was forced to take extreme action against a man who would have destroyed her. Anyone who questions that, anyone who tries to paint her actions as anything other than justified self-defense, is questioning whether any of us have the right to protect ourselves and our families. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Rowan continued, his voice gaining strength. So when the investigators come, you tell them the truth, all of it. Carver's illegal entry onto our lands, his attack on the village, his forces inside our walls, his fraudulent warrants and attempted kidnapping. And you tell them that the Duchess, faced with a knife thrown at her heart, defended herself the only way she could. He looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. This household stands together. We protect our own. And the Duchess is ours now. Is that understood? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Yes, Your Grace. The words came from dozens of throats, unified and strong. Evelyn's eyes widened slightly at the demonstration of loyalty. Rowan saw her blinking back tears as the household, her household now, rallied around her. Then we proceed. Rowan nodded once, sharply. Return to your duties. And thank you, all of you, for your courage last night and your loyalty today. The crowd dispersed, but several people approached Evelyn directly. Margaret, of course, offering quiet support, but also the guard captain expressing his respect for her bravery. The head cook, inviting her to discuss household menus when she felt ready. Even some of the younger servants, shyly telling her they were glad she was safe. By the time the hall cleared, Evelyn was overwhelmed. They're accepting me, actually accepting me. You earned it. Rowan guided her toward the study. They saw you stand and fight beside their duke, saw you defend yourself with courage and competence. That matters here more than bloodlines or social connections ever could. In the study, they found Edmund waiting with the copied documents and a letter that had arrived by fast courier. From the territorial magistrate, Edmund explained, handing it to Rowan. He's received preliminary reports of the incident and wishes to conduct an official investigation beginning tomorrow. Rowan read quickly, his expression thoughtful. He's being careful, thorough. That's actually good. It means he's taking this seriously, not trying to sweep it away. Will he rule in my favor? Evelyn asked quietly. He will, when he sees this evidence. Rowan tapped the folder of documents. Edmund, I want you to personally deliver these copies to the magistrate today, along with written testimony from everyone who witnessed the events. Make sure he understands we're cooperating fully because we have nothing to hide. It shall be done, Your Grace. Edmund collected the documents and departed. Alone again, Evelyn moved to the map table where Rowan had planned their defense just days ago. It feels strange, it being over. I've spent so long living in fear of what Carver would do next, and now there is no next. He's just gone. It will take time to fully believe it. Rowan joined her at the table. Your mind has been in survival mode for months. That doesn't just switch off because the threat's eliminated. How do you know? Because I've seen it before. Soldiers returning from campaigns, unable to relax even in safe territory. Their bodies know the danger is past, but their minds haven't caught up yet. He touched her shoulder gently. Give yourself time, Evelyn. You don't have to be immediately fine. She leaned into his touch, and they stood like that for a moment, drawing comfort from proximity. Then she straightened, something shifting in her expression. I want to go to the village. Rowan looked at her in surprise. Why? Because Carver's men attacked it to draw you out. Because people there were hurt because of me. Her voice was firm. I want them to see that I'm not hiding, that I care about what happened to them. That's politically astute. It's not political. It's right. She met his gaze. These people are part of the duchy now, part of what we're building. They deserve to know that their duchess isn't some fragile creature who needs constant protection, that she's someone who will stand beside them. Pride flickered in Rowan's chest. Then we go together. This afternoon after the magistrate receives the evidence. We'll make it clear this is a united front. The ride to the village was quiet, just Rowan, Evelyn, and 4 guards as escort. The settlement was small, maybe 30 buildings clustered around a central square, with fields and pastures stretching beyond. The 3 buildings that had burned were still smoking, though the fires had been contained before spreading. Villagers emerged as they approached, their expressions wary. These were people who'd lived under Ashford protection for generations, but they had also just been caught in the crossfire of noble conflicts. They had every right to be cautious. Rowan dismounted first, then helped Evelyn down. She immediately moved toward the nearest burned building, where a family was sorting through damaged belongings. I'm so sorry, she said simply, for what happened, for the danger that came to your home because of me. The family, a man, woman, and 2 children, stared at her in surprise. The woman spoke first, her voice careful. Your Grace, we heard stories about Lord Carver, about what he did. The stories are true. He was a dangerous man who wouldn't accept refusal. Evelyn's voice was steady. He came here to force the Duke's hand, to use you as leverage against me. I'm truly sorry you were caught in that. But you stopped him. This from the man, eyeing her with new respect. We heard you killed him yourself. That true? Evelyn hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. Yes. He tried to kill me, and I defended myself. It's over now. He won't threaten anyone again. More villagers had gathered, listening. An elderly man pushed forward, his weathered face thoughtful. My grandfather used to tell stories about the old Duke, current Duke's father. Said he was a hard man but fair. Said he protected what was his and asked same in return. You like that, Your Grace? Hard but fair? The question was directed at Evelyn, testing her. Rowan stayed silent, letting her answer for herself. I try to be fair, Evelyn said carefully, and I'll be as hard as necessary to protect what matters. This village matters. The people here matter. You're part of Ashford lands, which means you're part of what my husband and I defend. What happened here won't happen again. You have my word. The old man studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Good enough. Your Grace is honest, at least. That's more than most nobles offer. The tension in the square eased noticeably. Other villagers came forward with questions, concerns, requests for help rebuilding. Evelyn listened to all of them, made notes, promised resources from the estate to help with reconstruction. Rowan watched her work the crowd with natural grace, not the artificial charm of court politics, but genuine engagement. She remembered names after hearing them once, asked specific questions about children and crops and daily concerns that showed she was actually listening. By the time they prepared to leave, the village's attitude had transformed from wary to cautiously welcoming. The head man approached Rowan directly. "Your Grace, we're glad you married someone with spine. The duchy needs that." He glanced at Evelyn. "And we're glad she chose to stay and fight rather than run. Shows character." "She has plenty of that," Rowan agreed quietly. The ride back was peaceful, the winter sun breaking through clouds for the first time in days. Evelyn was quiet, processing the interaction, and Rowan let her think. Finally, she spoke. "They accepted me. Actually accepted me. Not because of my title or my bloodline or political connections, because I was honest with them. Because you treated them like people who deserve truth and respect." Rowan glanced at her. "That's rare in nobility. Most lords view their territories as resources to be managed, not communities to be engaged with. You engaged. They noticed. It felt right. Natural." She paused. "Is this what it means to be Duchess here? Actually knowing the people, caring about their lives? It's what it meant when my father ruled, what it means now that I do. And yes," he met her gaze, "what it will mean with you beside me." She smiled, and for the first time since Carver's death, it reached her eyes. "I think I can do this. Be this person, your partner in more than just survival." "I know you can." Rowan's voice was certain. "You've already started." That evening, the magistrate arrived. A stern man in his 60s named Robert Thornwell, accompanied by 2 clerks and a legal advisor. Rowan received them in his study, Evelyn at his side, and they spent 3 hours reviewing every detail of the incident. Thornwell was thorough but fair, asking sharp questions without accusation. When presented with Carver's fraudulent documents, his expression hardened. "This is serious criminal conduct. Magistrate Philip Carver will face significant consequences for this abuse of authority." He looked at Evelyn directly. "Your Grace, I need to ask you plainly, when you struck Lord Carver, was it in defense of your life?" "Yes." Evelyn's voice didn't waver. "He'd thrown a knife at me. I believed he would kill me if I didn't act, so I acted." "And you feel no remorse for his death?" The question hung heavy. Evelyn took a breath. "I feel relief that he can't hurt me or anyone else again. I feel regret that it came to violence, but remorse for defending my own life? No, magistrate, I don't." Thornwell nodded slowly. "An honest answer. Thank you, Your Grace." He turned to his clerks. "Mark this investigation as concluded. Findings: Lord Nathaniel Carver engaged in illegal trespass, fraudulent legal proceedings, and attempted murder. Duchess Evelyn Ashford acted in justified self-defense. No charges to be filed." The relief that flooded through Rowan was immediate and overwhelming. Beside him, Evelyn's shoulders sagged slightly as the tension finally released. "However," Thornwell continued, "there will be formal inquiries into Magistrate Philip Carver's conduct and into the network of officials who assisted Lord Carver's activities. Both of you may be called to provide testimony." "We'll cooperate fully," Rowan assured him. "I expect nothing less." Thornwell stood, gathering his documents. Your Grace, what happened here was tragic but clear-cut. Lord Carver created the situation through his own illegal actions. He faced the consequences of those actions. The law will record it as such." After the magistrate departed, Evelyn collapsed into a chair, all the composure draining away. "It's really over. Legally, officially over." "It is." Rowan poured wine for both of them. "Carver's dead, his crimes exposed, your innocence confirmed. You're free, Evelyn, truly free." She took the wine with trembling hands. "I don't even know what to do with freedom. It's been so long since I had it." "You build with it." He sat across from her. "You decide who you want to be, what you want to do, how you want to live. No more running, no more hiding, just choices." "And you?" She looked at him over the rim of her glass. "What will you do with this unexpected partnership that's become more than either of us planned?" Rowan considered the question seriously. "I'll honor it, nurture it, see where it leads." He paused. "If you're willing." "I am." She set down her glass and moved to him, settling beside his chair. "Rowan, I came here expecting cold transaction. Instead, I found someone who saw me, actually saw me, not as a possession or a problem, but as a person worth defending, worth fighting for, worth. She stopped, searching for words. Worth loving? He said it quietly, testing the waters. Her breath caught. Is that what this is? So soon? I don't know. Honesty felt essential. I know I care about you more than practical alliance dictates. I know your safety matters to me beyond political necessity. I know that when I thought you might die, something in me simply refused to accept it. He touched her face gently. Maybe that's love. Maybe it's the foundation of it. Maybe it's something that grows with time. But whatever it is, it's real. Evelyn leaned into his touch, then kissed him with fierce certainty. Then we build it, together, partners in survival, in strategy, and in whatever this becomes. Together, he agreed, pulling her closer. Outside, snow continued to fall on Ashford lands, covering the scars of recent violence with pristine white. The estate stood strong, its walls intact, its people safe. And inside those walls, two people who'd entered a marriage of convenience discovered they'd stumbled into something far more valuable. A partnership forged in fire and blood, a foundation built on respect and courage, and the first fragile shoots of something that might, with time and care, become love. The battle was won. Carver was dead, his network exposed, the immediate threat eliminated. But the war for their future, for what they could build together in this harsh, beautiful place, that war was just beginning. And for the first time in months, Evelyn faced it not with fear, but with hope. The winter deepened over the next weeks, blanketing Ashford lands in snow that transformed the harsh landscape into something almost beautiful. But beneath that tranquil surface, change was happening, subtle at first, then increasingly undeniable. Evelyn woke one morning to find Rowan already dressed, standing at the window of their shared chambers, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold and pink. They'd gradually migrated from separate quarters to shared space, a physical manifestation of the partnership that was evolving into something deeper. "You're up early," she murmured, moving to stand beside him. "Couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about the hearing." His voice was quiet, contemplative. "It's today. The capital's formal inquiry into Carver's activities and your actions." The hearing. They'd known it was coming. Despite Magistrate Thornwell's clearing of Evelyn, the King's Court had insisted on a formal review. Too many powerful people had been connected to Carver's network. Too many reputations at stake. The inquiry would examine everything: the marriage, the confrontation, the death, and the extensive documentation of Carver's crimes. "Are you worried?" Evelyn asked. "No." Rowan turned to face her. "Concerned about the political maneuvering, yes, but worried about the outcome? No. The truth is on our side, and we have documentation that proves it. The question is whether truth will matter more than political convenience. And if it doesn't, then we make it matter." His voice carried that steel she'd come to recognize, the absolute certainty that he would not yield. "Get dressed. We leave in an hour. I want to arrive early, establish presence before the vultures start circling." The journey to the territorial capital took most of the day. They traveled with a full escort, 20 guards in Ashford colors, Edmund managing logistics, and Margaret accompanying Evelyn as her lady's maid. It was a statement of strength and legitimacy, a duke and duchess traveling to answer questions with the full weight of their household behind them. The hearing was held in the Territorial Governor's Hall, a grand stone building that served as the seat of regional authority. As they entered, Evelyn saw the assembled crowd: nobles from surrounding territories, court officials, merchants whose business had intersected with Carver's, and in the back, barely visible, several women whose faces she recognized. The women Carver had targeted before her, the ones who'd survived his obsession. Their presence sent a jolt through Evelyn's chest. They'd come, to bear witness, to stand in solidarity, to finally have their stories heard. The hearing was presided over by Lord Chancellor Marcus Aldridge, a gray-haired veteran of court politics known for his fairness, but also his ruthless efficiency. He called the proceedings to order with a sharp rap of his gavel. We are here to examine the circumstances surrounding the death of Lord Nathaniel Carver on the estate of Duke Rowan Ashford, and to determine whether criminal proceedings are warranted against Duchess Evelyn Ashford. His voice carried through the hall. Duke Ashford, please present your testimony. Rowan stood, and the hall fell silent. He spoke clearly, methodically, walking through the entire sequence of events: Evelyn's arrival, the marriage, Carver's threats, the attack on the village and estate, the fraudulent warrants, the challenge to single combat, and finally Carver's attempted murder. The Duchess acted in self-defense against a man who had illegally invaded our territory, attacked our people, and attempted to kill her when his other efforts failed. Rowan's voice was hard, unyielding. No law in this realm criminalizes self-preservation. Yet some have suggested, Aldridge said carefully, that the Duchess may have married you under duress, that the entire situation was engineered to justify violence against Lord Carver. Then they're fools or liars. Rowan's bluntness made several nobles gasp. The Duchess and I will both testify under oath about the circumstances of our marriage. We'll present documentation of Carver's harassment campaign, and we'll introduce witnesses who can speak to his pattern of obsessive behavior toward women who refused his advances. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Aldridge raised his hand for silence. These witnesses, you have them present? We do. Rowan gestured toward the back of the hall. Women who survived Lord Carver's previous obsessions. Women who've lived in fear of speaking out because Carver's wealth and influence protected him. They're here now because they're no longer afraid. One by one, the women came forward. Evelyn recognized the one she'd met in the dressmaker's shop. Eleanor something, she couldn't remember the surname. The woman was trembling but determined as she took the witness stand. Lady Eleanor, Aldridge said gently, please tell us your experience with Lord Nathaniel Carver. Eleanor's voice shook at first, then grew stronger as she spoke. She described meeting Carver at a social function, his initial charm curdling into obsession, the gifts that became invasive, the attention that became surveillance. When she'd tried to refuse him, he'd destroyed her father's business partnerships, spread rumors about her character, and finally cornered her in her own home with a proposal that was clearly a threat. He told me I could accept his hand in marriage, or I could watch my family lose everything. Eleanor's hands clenched the witness rail. So I married him, and for 6 months he kept me locked in his estate, controlled every aspect of my life, treated me like a prized possession he could display or hide as it suited him. When I finally escaped with help from a cousin, he told everyone I'd gone mad, that I was unstable and unreliable. Why didn't you press charges? Aldridge asked. Because who would believe me against him? He had wealth, influence, magistrates on his payroll. Eleanor looked directly at Evelyn. When I heard the Duchess had killed him, I wept with relief, because finally someone had survived him. Someone had fought back. Someone had won. The second woman's story was similar: obsession, manipulation, eventual escape, and years of silence because speaking out seemed impossible. The third had never married Carver, but had fled to another territory entirely to escape his attention, abandoning her family and home rather than risk his courtship. By the time the fourth woman finished testifying, the hall was silent with a different quality than before. Not skeptical attention, but horrified realization. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern, a predator who'd operated with impunity for years. Aldridge's expression was grim. Duchess Ashford, please take the stand. Evelyn rose, feeling Rowan's steady presence behind her as she moved to the witness platform. She'd prepared for this, rehearsed with Rowan and Edmund, but standing before the assembled nobility with all eyes on her still made her heart race. Duchess, Aldridge began, walk us through your relationship with Lord Carver. From the beginning. She did. Every detail, every escalation, every manipulation. The way he'd isolated her socially, destroyed her father's business, made it clear that resistance would cost her everything. How the intermediaries had seemed like a solution, a way to escape. How she'd chosen Rowan's proposal because the remote estate and military reputation suggested he could defend against Carver's inevitable pursuit. I didn't marry Duke Ashford for love, she said clearly. I married him for survival. But that marriage was completely voluntary. I chose it. I chose him. And when Lord Carver came to take me by force, I chose to defend myself. Some might say you provoked the confrontation by refusing Lord Carver's legitimate courtship. There was nothing legitimate about it. Evelyn's voice cut through the hall like a blade. Courtship implies choice, mutual interest, the freedom to say no without facing destruction. Lord Carver never courted me. He hunted me. And when I had the audacity to refuse to be caught, he tried to kill me for it. Yet you killed him instead. Yes. She met Aldridge's gaze directly. He threw a knife at my heart. I defended myself with the only weapon I had. I don't regret it. I do it again, because I have the right to exist without being possessed, controlled, or destroyed by a man who thinks wealth entitles him to ownership of my life. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, from the back of the hall, one person began to clap. Eleanor. The sound echoed through the space, and then the other women joined in. Then some of the merchants who'd suffered Carver's business manipulations. Then, to Evelyn's shock, several nobles who'd apparently had their own grievances with the dead lord. Aldridge let it continue for a moment, then raised his hand. Order. We will have order. The clapping stopped, but the energy in the room had shifted fundamentally. Evelyn stepped down from the witness stand and returned to Rowan's side. He took her hand, squeezing gently, a private gesture of support in the public space. We will now review the documentary evidence, Aldridge announced. Bailiff, present the materials. What followed was methodical destruction of any remaining sympathy for Carver. The fraudulent warrants were examined and condemned. The correspondence documenting his conspiracy to track and control Evelyn was read aloud. The ledger showing payments to corrupt officials was entered into evidence. Each document drove home the same truth. Nathaniel Carver had been a predator who used wealth and influence to hunt women with impunity, until he'd finally hunted the wrong one. The deliberation took 2 hours. Evelyn and Rowan waited in an antechamber, not speaking much, just sitting close together. Finally, Edmund appeared. They're ready with the verdict. Back in the main hall, Aldridge stood before the assembled crowd, his expression grave. This inquiry has examined extensive evidence regarding Lord Nathaniel Carver's death. We find the following. Lord Carver engaged in a systematic pattern of harassment, manipulation, and illegal conduct toward Duchess Evelyn Ashford and multiple other women. He fraudulently obtained legal documents to give false authority to his actions. He invaded Ashford territory with armed forces, attacked civilian populations, and attempted murder when confronted. He paused, letting that settle. Duchess Evelyn Ashford acted in justified self-defense against an immediate lethal threat. No charges will be filed. Furthermore, this inquiry recommends a full investigation into the network of officials who enabled Lord Carver's activities, including but not limited to Magistrate Philip Carver, who will be immediately suspended from his position pending criminal proceedings. Relief flooded through Evelyn so powerfully she swayed slightly. Rowan's arm came around her waist, steadying her. Additionally, Aldridge continued, this inquiry acknowledges that Lord Carver's death, while tragic, has prevented future harm to unknown numbers of women. The Duchess's actions, while extreme, were necessitated by a complete failure of legal and social systems to protect her from a predator. This court formally recognizes that failure and apologizes for it. The words hung in the air, an official acknowledgement of systemic failure, of the ways institutions had enabled Carver's violence through indifference and corruption. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell, and suddenly people were surging forward, Eleanor and the other women wanting to thank Evelyn, nobles offering congratulations to Rowan, merchants seeking to establish relationships now that Carver's corrupting influence was gone. It was overwhelming, chaotic, and Evelyn felt herself drowning in it. Rowan cut through the chaos with practiced efficiency. Edmund, clear us a path. We're leaving. Your Grace, there are people who wish to speak. They can send correspondence. Rowan's voice was firm. My wife has endured enough scrutiny for one day. The ride back to the estate was quiet, Evelyn processing everything that had happened. The official vindication, the public acknowledgement, the transformation from accused to vindicated to somehow symbol of something larger than herself. You're thinking too hard, Rowan observed. I can see it in your face. I'm thinking about those women, the ones who testified. Evelyn looked at him. They found their voices today because I survived, because I fought back. That's significant. It is. You've become more than just the Duchess who defended herself. You've become proof that predators can be stopped, that silence can be broken. He paused. How does that feel? Terrifying, empowering, overwhelming. She smiled faintly. All of it at once. Good. You should feel all of it. You've earned it. Once. They arrived back at the estate to find it transformed. Word had traveled fast. The household had prepared a celebration. Not elaborate, but genuine. Food, music, the guards and servants gathering in the main hall to welcome them home. Margaret approached with tears in her eyes. Your Grace, we heard. The whole territory is talking about it. How you stood up to them, spoke the truth, won. We won, Evelyn corrected gently. All of us. This household, this duchy, we stood together. The celebration lasted into the evening. Evelyn found herself dancing with Rowan, his arms around her waist, moving to music that was simple but joyful. Around them, the household celebrated not just legal victory, but something deeper, the affirmation that standing together, they were stronger than any external threat. Later, much later, they stood on the battlements looking out over snow-covered lands. The winter stars were brilliant overhead, the air so cold it burned to breathe. I've been thinking, Rowan said quietly, about what comes next. What do you mean? I mean that we've spent weeks in survival mode, defending, reacting, proving our right to exist safely. But now that's done. Carver's dead, his network's collapsing. Your innocence is confirmed. He turned to face her. So what do we build with the freedom that gives us? Evelyn considered the question. I don't know. I've spent so long being defined by what I was running from, I'm not sure what I'm running toward. Then let's figure it out together. He took her hands. I know this started as convenience, mutual necessity. But, Evelyn, somewhere along the way, you stopped being a strategic alliance and started being my partner, in every sense that matters. I know. Her voice was soft. I feel it too. This thing between us, it's not what I expected when I arrived here. But it's real. Then let's make it official, not the legal marriage. We already have that. But the partnership, the choice. He squeezed her hands gently. I'm asking you, Evelyn Ashford, if you'll stay with me not because you have to, but because you want to. If you'll build this life, this duchy, this future with me as a true partner, not just a convenient arrangement. Rowan, she stopped, overwhelmed by the directness of it. You're asking me to choose this, actively choose it. I am, because you deserve that choice. You've spent months having choices taken from you, manipulated away from you. I want you to have this one freely. His eyes were steady on hers. Stay with me. Build with me. Not from obligation, but from desire. Evelyn looked at this man who'd defended her when he barely knew her, who'd stood beside her through violence and investigation, who'd given her the space to find her own strength, who'd proven through action, not words, that he saw her as an equal worthy of respect and partnership. Yes, she said simply. I choose this. I choose you. I choose us. He kissed her then, deep and fierce, and Evelyn kissed back with equal intensity. This wasn't the desperate kiss of two people clinging to survival. This was celebration, affirmation, the recognition that what they'd built through necessity had become something they both wanted. When they finally broke apart, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. I love you. I should probably say that more clearly. I love you, Evelyn, not despite the chaos you brought into my life, but because of who you proved yourself to be in the midst of it. I love you too. The words felt natural, true. I didn't think I could. Not so quickly, not after everything, but you made it impossible not to. You saw me, actually saw me, and decided I was worth fighting for, worth defending, worth loving. You made it easy. He pulled back slightly to look at her. You're brilliant, brave, ruthless when necessary, and kind when possible. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for. They stood together on the battlements as snow began to fall again, coating them in white. Below, The estate sprawled in all its harsh beauty, stone walls, smoke rising from chimneys, lights glowing in windows. Their domain, their responsibility, their home. Over the following months, Ashford lands transformed in ways both visible and subtle. Evelyn threw herself into the role of Duchess with the same strategic intelligence she'd used to survive Carver. She established regular visits to the villages, creating relationships with the people who actually worked the land and ran the small businesses that sustained the duchy. She reviewed the estate's finances and found inefficiencies to streamline, partnerships to strengthen, opportunities to expand. But more than that, she became a presence. The Duchess who'd killed her attacker in self-defense, who'd stood before the capital's inquiry and refused to be intimidated, who'd spoken truth to power and won. Women throughout the territory sought her out, not for charity or condescension, but for advice, support, solidarity. Evelyn found herself becoming something she'd never expected, a leader. Not through birthright or marriage, but through earned respect. Rowan watched this transformation with quiet pride, supporting without overshadowing. Their partnership deepened into something profound. Two people who'd started as strangers and become indispensable to each other. They governed the duchy together, making decisions jointly, playing to each other's strengths, and somewhere in the midst of administration and governance and daily life, they fell more deeply in love. It was Rowan who noticed Evelyn's sickness first, on a spring morning 6 months after Carver's death. She'd been pale, tired, avoiding certain foods. "You should see the physician," he said over breakfast. "I'm fine, just fatigue from travel." She'd recently returned from visiting the northern villages, a 3-day journey. "Evelyn," his voice carried concern, "please, for me." She went, more to ease his worry than from any real concern of her own. When she returned from the examination, Rowan was in his study reviewing reports. She entered quietly and closed the door behind her. "Well?" He looked up, trying to read her expression. "I'm pregnant." The words came out flat, shocked. "About 2 months along. The physician is certain." Rowan went absolutely still. Then he was on his feet, crossing to her in 3 strides. How do you feel about that?" "I don't know." Evelyn's voice wavered. "I hadn't thought about children yet. We've been so focused on building stability, on establishing ourselves, and now—" She stopped, pressing a hand to her stomach. "There's a life growing in me, a person who'll be part of this world we're creating, a person who'll have you as a mother." Rowan's hands came to rest gently on her shoulders. "Someone who'll grow up seeing strength, intelligence, courage as fundamental traits. Someone who'll learn from both of us what it means to survive, to fight, to build something worth defending." "You're happy about this?" It wasn't quite a question. "I'm terrified and elated in equal measure," he smiled. "But yes, happy. The idea of a child, our child, growing up here, in this place we've fought to make safe. That feels right, meaningful." Evelyn leaned into him, feeling his arms come around her. "I'm scared of what could go wrong, of whether I'll be a good mother, of bringing a child into a world that can be so brutal. Then we make sure our child is prepared for that brutality, that they're strong enough to face it, smart enough to navigate it, and compassionate enough not to become it." Rowan kissed the top of her head. "And you'll be an excellent mother. You're already excellent at everything else you attempt." Over the following months, Evelyn's pregnancy became a visible symbol of the duchy's renewal. The household rallied around her with protective devotion. The villages sent gifts and well wishes. Even some of the nobles who'd been skeptical of her at the inquiry sent congratulations. But not everything was celebration. Word reached them that Magistrate Philip Carver, facing criminal charges for his role in his cousin's schemes, had taken his own life rather than face trial. Several other officials implicated in the network had fled to other territories. The investigation had exposed rot throughout the regional administration. "It's bigger than we realized," Evelyn said one evening, reading through reports of the ongoing prosecutions. "The corruption Nathaniel enabled, it touched everything. Which is why your testimony mattered so much." Rowan sat beside her, reviewing the same documents. "You didn't just defend yourself. You exposed a system that was failing everyone it was supposed to protect. And now people expect me to fix it." She set down the papers, exhausted. I get letters every week. Women asking for help escaping abusive situations, merchants requesting intervention against corrupt officials, villagers seeking arbitration in disputes. They think because I survived Carver, I can solve everything. Can you? Not everything. Not alone. She looked at him. But together, we could make a difference. Real systemic change in how this territory handles power, corruption, protection of the vulnerable. Then let's do it. Rowan took her hand. Not immediately. You need to focus on the pregnancy, on staying healthy. But after, we make this duce a model for what governance should be. Fair, accountable, protective of all its people, not just the powerful ones. That's ambitious. You inspire ambition. He smiled. Besides, we've already proven we can accomplish the impossible. Why stop now? The baby was born on a clear autumn day, nearly a year after Evelyn's arrival at Ashford Manor. The labor was long and difficult, but Evelyn faced it with the same fierce determination she'd applied to everything else. When the midwife finally placed the infant in her arms, Evelyn wept, not from pain, but from overwhelming love for this tiny person who'd fought their way into the world. "A girl," the midwife announced, beaming, "healthy and strong." Rowan entered the chamber moments later, and Evelyn had never seen such raw emotion on his face. He approached slowly, almost reverently, looking down at their daughter with wonder. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's ours." Evelyn adjusted the blanket around the baby's tiny form. "What should we name her?" They discussed names throughout the pregnancy, never settling on anything definitive. But now, looking at his daughter's face, Rowan knew. "Eleanor," he said quietly, after the woman who had the courage to testify, who helped break the silence. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears again. "Eleanor Ashford. Yes, that's perfect." The christening was held a month later, attended by the entire household and representatives from every village in the duchy. Eleanor, the first woman who testified against Carver, stood as godmother, a symbolic gesture that meant more than any title. As the ceremony concluded and people celebrated, Evelyn found a quiet moment on the same battlements where she and Rowan had stood so many times before. She held Eleanor in her arms, looking out over lands that had become truly hers, not through marriage contract, but through blood, sweat, and the determination to make them a place worth living. Rowan joined her, his arm coming around her waist. "What are you thinking?" "That I came here expecting nothing but survival. A safe place to hide, a marriage of convenience, a life defined by what I was escaping from." She looked up at him. "Instead, I found purpose, partnership, love, a future worth fighting for." "We both did." He kissed her temple gently. "You transformed this place, Evelyn. Made it more than just a fortress. You made it a home, a beacon for people who need protection, justice, a second chance." "We did that together." She smiled, watching Eleanor sleep peacefully despite the celebration continuing below. "And we'll continue doing it. For her, for the people who depend on us, for ourselves." "For as long as we have," Rowan agreed. They stood together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Below them, the household celebrated not just a christening, but everything it represented: new life, new hope, new possibilities. The journey that had begun with desperation and necessity had become something neither of them could have predicted. A marriage that started as cold transaction had evolved into profound partnership. Two people who'd been shaped by survival had learned to build something beyond mere existence. They'd created a life, a family, a legacy. And in doing so, they'd proven something essential, that power wasn't about control or possession. True power came from the courage to choose your own path, the strength to defend what mattered, and the wisdom to build something worth defending. Evelyn had arrived at Ashford Manor as a woman fleeing a nightmare, desperate for any sanctuary she could find. She'd gambled everything on a stranger's protection, a marriage to a man she didn't know, a remote estate that might become either refuge or prison. Instead, she'd found herself. Her strength, her voice, her purpose. And she'd found a partner who saw her not as a problem to solve or a possession to protect, but as an equal worthy of respect, trust, and love. Together, they'd faced obsession and violence. They'd survived investigation and judgment. They'd built something new from the ruins of what had nearly destroyed her. And now, holding their daughter under a darkening sky, they looked toward a future that was theirs to shape. Not defined by fear or survival or the shadow of past trauma, but by choice, partnership, and the absolute certainty that together they were stronger than any force that might threaten them. The snow would fall again. Winter would return. Challenges would come as they always did in these harsh mountains. But Evelyn Ashford, survivor, duchess, mother, partner, would face them with courage forged in fire, strength proven through trial, and love that had transformed a marriage of convenience into the foundation of everything that mattered. She'd come to Ashford Land seeking shelter from a storm. She'd stayed to become the shelter itself. For her husband, her daughter, her people, and anyone else who needed proof that survival was possible. That justice could prevail, and that love, when built on respect and equality, could conquer even the darkest obsession. The battle was long over. Carver was dead, his network destroyed, his crimes exposed. But the victory? That was just beginning. And it would echo through generations, a story of two people who'd started as strangers and become legends, not through birthright or wealth or violence, but through the simple, profound act of choosing each other, standing together, and refusing to be defined by anything except what they built with their own hands. In a world shaped by control and fear, they'd redefined power and proved that love, forged in adversity, could indeed conquer anything.